The Duke's Obsession, when a wallflower sparked a war between brothers. London, 1875. Lady Eliera Vance stood in the corner of the grandest ballroom in England, invisible as always, until the moment Caleb Arden, society's golden boy, crossed the marble floor and asked her to dance. The room fell silent. Gasps rippled through the crowd. But it wasn't Caleb's charm that made her skin burn. It was the ice-cold stare of his brother, Duke Adrian Arden, watching from the shadows like a predator who'd just found his prey. What happened next would destroy reputations, shatter families, and prove that sometimes the forgotten are the most dangerous of all. If you want to see how a wallflower became a duchess and made two powerful men fight for her soul, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. The champagne had gone warm in Eliara's gloved hand. She stood against the silk-papered wall of Rothmore Hall, watching London's elite swirl past her in waves of expensive perfume and even more expensive jewelry. 3 seasons now. 3 goddamn seasons she'd stood in corners like this one, holding drinks she didn't want, wearing dresses her mother insisted made her look presentable, which was just a polite word for plain. "Don't slouch, Eliara," her mother had hissed earlier, before abandoning her near the refreshment table. "And for heaven's sake, smile. You look as if someone's died." Someone had. Her dignity. 3 years ago, when she'd first entered society at 18 and realized within a week that she simply didn't matter. Wrong family, too minor. Wrong face, too unremarkable. Wrong everything. The music shifted. A waltz. Eliara's stomach tightened as couples paired off, the men leading, the women following with practiced grace. She'd danced maybe 4 times total across 3 seasons, and 3 of those had been with elderly cousins who smelled like tobacco and talked about their gout. "She's back again." The voice came from her left. Eliara didn't need to look to know it was Beatrice Thornwell and her pack of parasites, young women who'd perfected the art of the cutting remark. "I don't know why she bothers," another voice chimed in, saccharine sweet. "No one's going to ask her. They never do." Eliara's fingers tightened on her glass. She could leave, should leave, but that would be admitting defeat, and she'd be damned if she gave them that satisfaction. "Maybe she enjoys watching," Beatrice continued, just loud enough to carry. "Some people are meant to be spectators, not participants." Heat crawled up Eliara's neck. She turned away, focusing on the dancers, on anything but the poison dripping from Beatrice's mouth. The room blurred slightly. Tears? No, she wouldn't. Not here. Not for them. Then the crowd shifted, and she saw him. Caleb Arden moved through the ballroom like sunlight through water. Easy, natural, inevitable. Golden hair swept back from a face that could have been carved by some Renaissance master who specialized in making women forget how to breathe. He wore his formal wear with the casual elegance of someone who'd never questioned his right to wear it. His smile bright enough to light the entire room. Eliara had seen him before, of course. Everyone had. The younger Arden son was London society's darling, the charming one, the easy one, the one mothers warned their daughters about in hushed tones while secretly hoping he'd notice them anyway. He was dancing with Caroline Ashford now, spinning her across the floor with practiced ease. Caroline laughed at something he said, her face flushed with pleasure and champagne. "He's magnificent, isn't he?" Eliara startled. An older woman had appeared beside her, someone's aunt or chaperone, face lined with age but eyes sharp. "I suppose," Eliara said carefully. Charming boy. Terrible reputation." The woman sipped her drink. "But then, that's half the appeal, isn't it? Women always think they'll be the one to change them." "Do they change?" "Never." The woman's smile was knowing. "But we keep hoping anyway. Such is the nature of pretty boys with sad eyes. They collect hearts like some men collect watches." The waltz ended. Caleb bowed to Caroline, who looked devastated to let him go. He said something that made her blush, then turned away, scanning the room. His eyes landed on Eliara. She froze. There was no way, absolutely no goddamn way, he was looking at her. There had to be someone behind her. Someone beautiful or important or literally anyone else. But Caleb's smile widened, and he started walking toward her. "Oh dear," the older woman murmured. "How interesting." Eliara's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't happening. This was some sort of mistake or joke or hallucination brought on by too much champagne and not enough food. Any second now he'd veer off, find whoever he was actually looking for, and she'd go back to being invisible. He didn't veer off. Lady Eliara Vance, Caleb said, stopping directly in front of her. Up close, he was even more devastating, green eyes bright with mischief, mouth curved in a smile that promised trouble. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. Her mouth had gone dry. We haven't. A tragedy I intend to remedy immediately. He executed a perfect bow. Caleb Arden, at your service. Would you do me the honor of the next dance? The ballroom had gone quiet. Not completely. The music still played, couples still moved, but there was a hush, a collective intake of breath, as if society itself had paused to watch this moment. Eliara heard Beatrice's shocked gasp from across the room. Her voice came out strangled. You want to dance with me? Unless you're otherwise engaged? His eyes sparkled with amusement. I promise I don't bite. Well, not on the first dance, anyway. Somewhere in the crowd, someone tittered nervously. This was insane. This was impossible. Men like Caleb Arden didn't ask women like Eliara Vance to dance. There were rules, unspoken but ironclad, and she knew her place in them. Why? The words slipped out before she could stop it. Caleb's smile shifted, became something softer, more genuine. Because you're the only woman in this room who isn't trying to catch my eye. And because I've been watching you stand here alone for 3 dances now, and that strikes me as a criminal waste. She had no idea what to say to that. Say yes, he urged. Before I'm forced to make an even bigger spectacle of myself. I'm very good at spectacles. Ask anyone. She should say no. Whatever this was, pity, a bet, some elaborate joke, she should refuse gracefully and return to her corner and her invisibility. Instead, she heard herself say, yes. His smile was blinding. Excellent. He took her hand, his touch warm through her glove, and led her onto the dance floor. Eliara was intensely aware of every eye in the room tracking their movement, every whisper that rippled through the crowd. Her mother looked stunned. Beatrice looked murderous. And somewhere in her peripheral vision, she caught a flash of movement in the shadows. Someone else was watching. But then the music started, and Caleb's hand settled on her waist, and the rest of the world narrowed to the man in front of her. Relax, he murmured, as they began to move. You're holding yourself like you expect me to drop you. I expect you to come to your senses and realize you've made a terrible mistake. He laughed, genuine and surprised. Has anyone ever told you you're brutally honest? Has anyone ever told you you're reckless? Daily. Usually my brother. His expression flickered, something complicated passing across his features. He's here tonight, actually, probably glowering at me from some dark corner. He's excellent at glowering. Your brother, Eliara repeated. The Duke. Adrian, yes. Older, richer, significantly less charming. Caleb spun her expertly through a turn. We're not particularly close. That was putting it mildly. Even Eliara, with her limited social intelligence, knew the Arden brothers were a study in contrasts. Caleb, the golden son, beloved by society. Adrian, the Duke, feared and respected in equal measure, known for his cold demeanor and ruthless business practices. She'd never actually seen the Duke up close. He didn't attend balls often, and when he did, he remained at the edges, watching rather than participating. Why did you really ask me to dance? She couldn't help herself. The question had been burning since the moment he'd approached. Caleb's eyes met hers, and for a moment his practiced charm slipped, revealing something rawer underneath. Honestly? Because you looked like you needed rescuing, and because those vultures by the window were being cruel, and I've never much liked bullies. So this is pity. This is basic human decency. His hand tightened slightly on her waist, which shouldn't be remarkable, but apparently in this room, it is. The music swelled around them. Eliara had never been a particularly good dancer, another mark against her in society's ledger, but Caleb led with such confidence that she found herself following without thinking, her body responding to his guidance. You're better at this than you think, he said, reading her expression. You just needed someone who knew what they were doing. And that's you? Someone who knows what they're doing? His laugh was self-deprecating. God, no. I'm making it up as I go along, but I'm very good at pretending otherwise. There was something in his voice, a thread of truth beneath the lightness, that made her look at him more carefully. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight shadows beneath them. He looked tired, she realized. tired in a way that had nothing to do with late nights and everything to do with wearing a mask for too long. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly. "Because you asked a real question. Most people don't." He spun her again, his movements fluid and practiced. "They ask how I am, but they don't want an honest answer. They want the charming Caleb Arden they've built in their heads." "And who is the real Caleb Arden?" His smile turned rueful. "Still figuring that out." The waltz ended. Caleb stepped back, bowing formally, while Eliara struggled to remember how to curtsy. Around them, couples were dispersing, conversation resuming at full volume now that the spectacle had ended. "Thank you for the dance, Lady Eliara," Caleb said, loud enough to be heard by nearby gossips. Then quieter, just for her. "You made it bearable." Before she could respond, he was gone, swept up by a group of young men calling his name. Eliara stood alone on the dance floor, feeling exposed and strange, as if she'd stepped out of her own skin and hadn't quite figured out how to get back in. "Well," the voice came from behind her, so cold it could have frozen champagne. Eliara turned. Adrian Arden stood 3 feet away. She'd seen his portrait, of course. Everyone had. But portraits couldn't capture the sheer presence of the man. He was taller than Caleb, broader in the shoulders, with the same aristocratic features sharpened into something harder, more severe. His hair was darker, almost black, and his eyes, Christ, his eyes were the color of winter storms, gray and depthless and currently fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Where Caleb was sunlight, Adrian was shadow. Where Caleb smiled, Adrian studied. And where Caleb had looked at her with warm amusement, Adrian looked at her like she was a problem that needed solving, or a threat that needed eliminating. "Your Grace," Eliara managed, dropping into a curtsy that felt awkward and inadequate. He didn't speak, just stood there, watching her with that unnerving stillness that reminded her of a predator deciding whether something was prey or rival. The silence stretched. Eliara's heart was doing something complicated in her chest, a rhythm that had nothing to do with the lingering excitement of the dance and everything to do with the man in front of her. Finally, Adrian spoke. "My brother has peculiar taste in dance partners." It wasn't quite an insult, but it wasn't far off. Eliara felt heat climb her cheeks. "I'm sorry if our dance offended you." "Offended?" Something flickered in those gray eyes. "Why would I be offended? I don't know. You're staring at me like I've committed some crime." The words were out before she could stop them. Eliara bit her tongue, waiting for the aristocratic dismissal, the cutting remark that would put her back in her place. Instead, Adrian's mouth curved. Not quite a smile, but close. Direct. Unusual. Is that a compliment or an observation? Both. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with that same unsettling focus. Lady Eliara Vance, daughter of Baron Vance of Northumberland, 3 seasons, no proposals, generally ignored by society at large. Her stomach dropped. "You've researched me. I make it a point to know who's in my orbit." "I'm not in your orbit." "You danced with my brother. That puts you in my orbit." His eyes narrowed. "The question is what you want from him." Anger flared, hot and unexpected. "I want nothing from him. He asked me to dance. I accepted. That's all." "Is it?" "Yes." She met his gaze directly, refusing to look away despite every instinct screaming at her to submit, to back down, to return to her corner and her invisibility. "I don't know what game you think is being played here, Your Grace, but I'm not a participant." "Everyone's a participant," Adrian said quietly, "whether they want to be or not. Then I choose not to be. Choice is an illusion for people without power." The words landed like a slap. Eliara's hands clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms through the thin silk of her gloves. He was right, of course. She had no power here, no influence, no protection against men like him who could destroy her reputation with a word. But she was tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being dismissed. Tired of playing by rules designed to keep her small. "If we're done here," she said, voice steady despite the trembling in her hands, "I'd like to return to my wallflower post. I'm sure you have more important people to intimidate." For a moment, she thought she saw surprise flash across Adrian's face. Then it was gone, replaced by that same cold assessment. "We're done," he said. "For now." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd with the same quiet authority that seemed to part the masses without him having to ask. Eliara stood there, shaking, her mind racing. What the hell had just happened? One dance with Caleb and suddenly she was on a duke's radar? This was insane. This was dangerous. This was the most alive she'd felt in 3 years. Eliara! Her mother materialized out of the crowd, face flushed with equal parts excitement and panic. What on earth was that? Caleb Arden. And then the Duke himself came to speak with you? I don't know, Mother. Well, we need to, her mother floundered, clearly torn between social climbing ambition and maternal protection. Did the Duke say anything about calling on you? He said I have no power, and choice is an illusion. Her mother paled. Oh God, you've offended him somehow. We need to leave, now. But Eliara wasn't listening. Her eyes had found Caleb again, across the ballroom, laughing with his friends. As if he could feel her gaze, he looked up, met her eyes, and smiled. Then she found Adrian standing in the shadows near the doorway, not laughing, not smiling, just watching her with that same intense focus that made her skin burn and her pulse race. Two brothers, sunlight and shadow, charm and intensity. And somehow, impossibly, she'd caught both their attention. This was going to end badly. She knew that with the same certainty, she knew her own name. Men like the Ardens didn't pay attention to women like her unless they wanted something, and whatever they wanted, it would cost more than she could afford to give. But as her mother tugged her toward the exit, Eliara found herself looking back one more time. Caleb had turned away, already engaged in new conversation. But Adrian was still watching, his expression unreadable in the low light, his eyes tracking her movement through the crowd like a wolf tracking prey through winter snow. She should be afraid. She was afraid. But beneath the fear was something else, something that felt dangerously close to anticipation. The next morning arrived with rain and regret. Eliara woke to gray light filtering through her bedroom curtains and the sound of water pelting the windows. Her head ached, too much champagne, not enough sleep, and far too many hours spent replaying every moment of the previous night. You're being ridiculous, she told her reflection in the vanity mirror. It was one dance? It meant nothing. But her reflection looked unconvinced, and Eliara couldn't blame her. One dance didn't explain why Caleb had asked her in the first place, and it certainly didn't explain Adrian's cold interrogation afterward. A knock at her door. Miss Eliara, your mother wants you downstairs. Of course she did. Eliara dragged herself into a day dress, simple blue cotton, nothing remarkable, and made her way to the breakfast room. Her mother was already there, vibrating with nervous energy, a stack of calling cards arranged on the table in front of her. You have callers, she announced, as if Eliara had spontaneously developed the ability to summon visitors through sheer force of will. What? Who? Lord Pemberton, Sir Charles Waverley, and... Her mother's voice dropped to an awed whisper. Caleb Arden. The room tilted slightly. Caleb Arden is here? Now? In our sitting room, with flowers. Her mother looked torn between delight and terror. Expensive flowers. Eliara, what did you do last night? I danced, once, that's all. Well, apparently once was enough. Her mother smoothed her skirts with shaking hands. You need to go down there. Be charming, be interesting. For God's sake, don't mention politics or philosophy or any of those things you read about. So be someone I'm not. Be someone he'd want. Her mother's expression softened slightly. Please, darling, this might be your only chance. The words stung, but they weren't wrong. At 21, after 3 failed seasons, Eliara was dangerously close to being permanently relegated to the shelf. 1 more year, maybe 2, and even her mother would give up, resign herself to having a spinster daughter who'd spend her life managing the family estate and being the subject of pitying glances at church. Fine, Eliara said. I'll be charming. She wasn't charming. She was terrified. The sitting room felt too small with Caleb Arden in it. He dominated the space simply by existing, his presence turning their modest home into something that felt shabby and inadequate by comparison. He stood when she entered, that easy smile already in place. Lady Eliara, good morning. Mr. Arden, she managed a curtsy that didn't embarrass her. This is unexpected. I hope not unwelcome. He gestured to the chair across from him. May I? They sat. Her mother hovered in the doorway for a moment before reluctantly withdrawing, though Eliara knew she'd be pressed against the door, listening to every word. I brought flowers, Caleb said, nodding to the ridiculous bouquet on the side table, roses and lilies arranged with obvious expense. Though I'm realizing now that's rather presumptuous. We've only danced once. Most people would have stopped at the dance. I'm not most people. His smile widened. Besides, I wanted to see if you were as interesting in daylight as you were in the ballroom. And? The verdict's still out. You haven't said much yet. Eliara felt a laugh bubble up despite her nerves. What would you like me to say? Whatever you're actually thinking. Caleb leaned back in his chair, completely at ease in a way she envied. Last night you were honest, brutally so. I'd like more of that. Most men prefer women who flatter them. Most men are boring. He studied her with those bright green eyes. Tell me something true, Eliara. May I call you Eliara? You're already doing it. So I am. His grin was unrepentant. Something true. Go. She should say something safe, something pleasant, something designed to keep him interested without revealing too much. Instead, she said, I think you're bored. His eyebrows rose. Excuse me? Last night, this morning, you're not here because you find me fascinating. You're here because everyone else bores you to tears, and I'm novel, different, a distraction. She met his gaze directly. I think you collect broken things because fixing them makes you feel useful. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Caleb started laughing, real laughter, the kind that lit up his entire face and made him look younger, less polished. Christ. Okay, that was honest. You asked. I did. He wiped his eyes, still grinning. And you're not wrong. I am bored. Constantly. Every ball, every party, every conversation that's just people saying what they think I want to hear. His expression sobered slightly. But you're wrong about one thing. What's that? You're not broken. His voice was quiet, serious in a way that made her chest tight. You're just surrounded by people too stupid to see what's right in front of them. Eliara didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to process the sudden shift from playful banter to something that felt dangerously close to genuine feeling. Why are you really here? She asked finally. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window, to the rain still coming down in sheets. When he spoke, his voice was different, stripped of charm, raw with something that might have been pain. Because my life is a performance I'm tired of giving. Because everyone wants Caleb Arden, the charming wastrel, and no one wants to know who I actually am. He looked back at her. And because when I danced with you last night, you looked at me like I was just a person, not a prize, not a scandal, just someone. And I can't remember the last time that happened. The vulnerability in his voice hit her like a punch to the chest. This was the real Caleb, she realized. Not the golden boy society loved, but the man underneath, lost and tired and desperate for something authentic. I don't know what you want from me, she said softly. Honestly, neither do I. He ran a hand through his hair, mussing the careful style. I just know I wanted to see you again. That's all I've got. It should have been a red flag. Should have been a warning sign screaming that this man was trouble, that getting involved with him would end in disaster. But Eliara found herself smiling anyway. That's enough. They talked for another hour. About nothing important, books, horses, the weather, his travels abroad. But beneath the surface conversation there was something else building. A connection, tentative and fragile between two people who'd spent too long wearing masks they were tired of carrying. When Caleb finally left, promising to call again soon, Eliara stood at the window and watched his carriage disappear into the rain. He's going to break your heart, she told herself, but she was already halfway gone, and she knew it. Caleb did call again, and again, and again. Over the next 3 weeks, he became a fixture in Eliara's life. Flowers at breakfast, rides through Hyde Park in his ridiculous expensive carriage, afternoons spent in her family's cramped sitting room, talking about everything and nothing. Society noticed. Of course they noticed. Wherever Caleb went, attention followed, and suddenly Eliara found herself the subject of whispers and speculation. She must have something, Beatrice Thornwell said loudly at Lady Morrison's garden party, making sure Eliara could hear. Some trick. Men like Caleb Arden don't pursue wallflowers without reason. Eliara tried not to care, tried to focus on the strange, wonderful reality that Caleb seemed to genuinely enjoy her company. He made her laugh, made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced, made her forget for hours at a time that she was supposed to be invisible. But there was something else too, something she only noticed in quiet moments. Adrian. The Duke was everywhere and nowhere, a shadow at the edge of her awareness. She'd catch glimpses of him at social events, always watching, never approaching. His carriage would pass hers in the park, and she'd feel his gaze even through the curtained windows. Once, she'd turned around in a bookshop and found him standing 3 shelves away, holding a book he clearly wasn't reading, his eyes fixed on her with that same unsettling intensity. It should have been frightening. It was frightening. But it was also something else. Something that made her skin flush and her pulse race in ways that had nothing to do with fear. "You're being paranoid," Caleb said when she mentioned it during one of their rides. "Adrian doesn't care about my social life. He's too busy being important and brooding." "He cares about something," Eliara insisted. "He's always there, watching." Caleb's expression darkened slightly. "My brother has control issues. He thinks he needs to monitor everything I do because I'm the reckless one." The bitterness in his voice was sharp. "Ignore him, I do." But she couldn't ignore Adrian, couldn't shake the feeling that there were currents moving beneath the surface, forces she didn't understand pulling her towards something she couldn't quite name. And then came the Devereux Ball. It was supposed to be the event of the season. Lord and Lady Devereux spared no expense, transforming their estate into something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, imported flowers, an orchestra that must have cost more than Eliara's family made in a year. Caleb found her within minutes of her arrival, as he always did now, his smile bright and his bow exaggerated. "My lady," he said, loud enough for nearby gossips to hear. "You look stunning." She didn't. Her dress was last season's style, altered by her mother's inexpert hands to be more fashionable. But Caleb looked at her like she was wearing silk and diamonds, and that was almost enough. Almost. "Dance with me," he said, offering his hand. They'd danced together at every event for 3 weeks now. Society had stopped gasping, started speculating about when he'd propose. Eliara's mother practically vibrated with anticipation every time he called, but something felt different tonight. Caleb's smile was too bright, his charm too practiced. He was performing again, she realized, wearing the mask he'd claimed to hate. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly as they moved through the waltz. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" "You seem distant." His laugh was hollow. Perceptive as always. He spun her through a turn, his grip tighter than necessary. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you love me?" The question landed like a boulder in still water. Eliara's feet tangled, and she would have stumbled if Caleb hadn't been holding her. What?" It's a simple question. But his eyes were anything but simple. They were desperate, searching, looking for something she wasn't sure she could give. "Do you love me, Eliara?" Her mind raced. Did she? She cared for him, enjoyed his company, felt something when he looked at her that might have been the beginning of love, given time. But was it love? Real, deep, consuming love? She didn't know. "I could," she said finally, honestly. "I think I could, given time." Something in Caleb's expression crumbled. "That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed. "It's not." The music ended. Caleb stepped back, his mask slipping back into place, the charming smile returning like armor. "Thank you for the dance," he said formally. "If you'll excuse me." He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the crowd with practiced ease. Eliara stood alone on the dance floor, feeling like she'd just failed some test she hadn't known she was taking. "He's running." The voice came from behind her, cold, familiar, inevitable. She turned. Adrian stood there in formal black, looking like he'd been carved from shadow and ice. His eyes tracked Caleb's retreat across the ballroom. "Your Grace," Eliara managed. "My brother excels at running," Adrian continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "From responsibility, from commitment, from anything that requires him to be more than the charming mask he wears." "That's cruel." "It's true." Those gray eyes shifted to her, and the intensity in them stole her breath. "He's going to hurt you." "You don't know that." "I know him." Adrian stepped closer, and suddenly the entire ballroom seemed to shrink to just the two of them. "I know that he collects broken things because fixing them makes him feel noble, and I know that he loses interest the moment they're no longer a project. I'm not broken." No. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. You're not. Which is why this is going to destroy you when he leaves. The certainty in his voice made her cold. Why are you telling me this? Because someone should. He was close now. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him, could smell expensive soap and something darker, richer. Because you deserve better than being another name on his list of almosts. And what would you know about what I deserve? The question hung between them, charged with something Eliara couldn't name. Adrian's jaw tightened, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her feel exposed, vulnerable, seen in ways that went deeper than anything Caleb had ever made her feel. More than you think, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Eliara standing alone, her heart racing and her mind spinning with questions she was afraid to answer. The rest of the ball passed in a blur. Caleb didn't return. Adrian disappeared into the shadows, and Eliara found herself trapped between two brothers, one who made her feel special and might not be able to stay, and one who made her feel dangerous and might not be willing to let her go. When she finally made it home, exhausted and confused, she found a note waiting on her bedside table. The handwriting was elegant, precise, unmistakably masculine. Some cages are built with charm, some with intensity. Both will trap you if you're not careful. Choose wisely. A. Eliara crumpled the note in her fist, her hand shaking with something that might have been anger or fear or the first stirrings of understanding. She was caught between the Arden brothers, whether she'd meant to be or not, and tomorrow, everything was going to change. Morning came with a summons, not a calling card, not flowers, a formal request delivered by a footman in Arden livery asking, no, politely demanding, that Lady Eliara Vance present herself at Caleb Arden's townhouse at 2 o'clock. Her mother nearly fainted. This is it, she whispered, clutching the note like a holy relic. He's going to propose. He must be. But Eliara knew better. The note was too formal, too cold. This wasn't a proposal. This was something else. She arrived at the townhouse exactly on time, wearing her second-best dress and a knot of anxiety in her stomach that had been growing since dawn. A servant showed her to a private sitting room, tastefully decorated, expensive without being ostentatious, and left her alone. Caleb appeared 5 minutes later. He looked terrible. The golden charm was gone, stripped away to reveal a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was disheveled, his cravat loose, his eyes shadowed with something that might have been pain or guilt, or both. Eliara, he said. Just her name. No greeting, no smile. Her stomach dropped. What's wrong? He crossed to the window, staring out at the street below. When he spoke, his voice was raw. I can't do this. Can't do what? This. Us. He turned to face her, and the anguish in his expression made her chest ache. I'm not the man you think I am. I know who you are. No. You know who I want to be. There's a difference. He ran both hands through his hair, the gesture desperate. I'm a coward, Eliara. I chase pretty things and I get bored and I run the moment things get real. I've done it a dozen times before and I'll do it again. You don't know that. I do, because I'm doing it now. His laugh was bitter, self-loathing. You asked me last night if you loved me and you said maybe. Maybe, given time. And all I could think was that I don't want to wait. I want it now, immediate and overwhelming, or I want nothing at all. Tears burned Eliara's eyes. So this is it? You're ending this? I'm setting you free. He crossed to her, took her hands in his. His grip was gentle, desperate. You deserve someone who can give you everything. Commitment, constancy, a love that doesn't waver the moment it gets difficult. I can't be that person. You're not even going to try? I'd fail. And I care about you too much to watch that happen. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Eliara, for all of it. For making you hope, for making you care, for being exactly what my brother said I was. He let go of her hands and stepped back, and Eliara felt something crack inside her chest. You're a coward, she said, voice shaking. Not because you won't commit, because you won't even try. I know, and you're going to regret this. I know that too. His smile was sad, resigned. But I'd regret hurting you more. There was nothing left to say. Eliara turned and walked out of the townhouse, her vision blurred with tears, her hands shaking with the effort of not falling apart. She made it to the street before the sobs started. The carriage ride home was a blur of tears and rage and a crushing sense of humiliation. She'd been right that first night. Men like Caleb Arden didn't pay attention to women like her. And when they did, it ended like this, with broken promises and shattered hope and the bitter knowledge that she'd been foolish enough to believe she might have been different. She was still crying when she reached her front door and found Adrian Arden waiting on her steps. He stood when he saw her, his expression unreadable in the afternoon light. "Eliara, go away." Her voice was wrecked, raw with tears she couldn't stop. "No. I don't want your pity. I don't want your 'I told you so.' I just want to be left alone. I'm not here to gloat." Adrian descended the steps slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something wild that might bolt. "I'm here because I knew what he was going to do, and I knew you'd need..." "Need what? You? Another Arden brother to break my heart?" Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm done. I'm done with both of you." She tried to push past him, to reach her door and the sanctuary of her room and the blessed relief of being alone with her humiliation. Adrian caught her wrist. Not hard, not painful, but firm enough to stop her, to make her look at him. "Let me go," she said. "No." His voice was low, rough, with something she couldn't identify. "Not until you listen." "I don't want to listen. I don't want..." "I love you." The words stopped her cold. Eliara stared at him, certain she'd heard wrong, certain the tears and the heartbreak had scrambled her brain, and she was hearing things that weren't there. "What?" Adrian's grip on her wrist tightened fractionally, his thumb pressing against her racing pulse. His eyes, those cold gray eyes that had watched her for weeks, were burning now, intense and desperate and completely, terrifyingly focused on her. "I love you," he repeated, every word deliberate, measured, true. "I have since the moment Caleb first danced with you, and you looked at me like I was something dangerous. I love the way you refuse to be invisible, even when the world tries to make you. I love your honesty, your strength, your absolute refusal to be anything other than exactly who you are. You don't even know me. I've spent 3 weeks learning you, every ball, every party, every ride through the park. I've watched you, studied you, tried to understand why my worthless brother had the good sense to see what I'd been too blind to notice." His free hand came up to cup her face, his touch gentle, despite the intensity in his voice. "I know you take your tea with too much sugar. I know you read philosophy when you think no one's watching. I know you're terrified of being forgotten and furious that you have to fight to be remembered." Tears were still streaming down her face, but they changed somehow. No longer just grief, but something more complicated. "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes." Adrian's thumb brushed away a tear, the gesture so tender it made her chest ache. Caleb had his chance. He wasted it. I won't make the same mistake. "You can't just... He's your brother. This is... I don't care." The words were fierce, final. "I don't care about propriety or scandal or what society thinks. I care about you. And I'm telling you now, before you walk through that door and decide you're done with the Arden family forever, that I am not my brother. I don't run. I don't quit. And when I commit to something, I see it through." Eliara's mind was spinning, her heart racing, every logical thought she'd ever had screaming that this was wrong, impossible, too much too soon. But Adrian was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. And God help her, she wanted to believe him. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "Say you'll let me prove it." His hand slid from her face to her neck, his touch burning through her skin. "Say you'll give me a chance to show you what real commitment looks like. Say you'll let me worship you the way you deserve." "Adrian, say yes, Eliara." She should say no, should run, should protect herself from what would certainly be another disaster, another heartbreak. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "Yes." Adrian's eyes blazed, then his mouth was on hers, and the world caught fire. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined, nothing gentle or tentative or careful. It was consuming, desperate, 3 weeks of suppressed wanting unleashed all at once. Adrian kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, his hands tangling in her hair, his body pressing her back against the iron railing of her front steps. Eliara kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his coat, pulling him closer even though there was no closer to get. She could taste his need, his hunger, his absolute certainty in this impossible thing happening between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "Mine," he said, the word a promise and a claim and a threat all at once. "You're mine now, and I don't let go of what's mine." Somewhere in the back of her mind, Eliara knew this was dangerous. Knew she was trading one Arden brother for another, charm for intensity, warmth for heat. But as Adrian pulled her close and kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, she found she didn't care. She'd been invisible for too long. And Adrian Arden saw her like no one else ever had. Whatever came next, scandal, heartbreak, or something else entirely, she was done hiding. The wallflower was finished being forgotten, and London society was about to learn exactly what happened when you overlooked the wrong woman. The scandal broke within hours. Eliara should have known it would. A duke kissing a baron's daughter on her own front steps in broad daylight wasn't the kind of thing London society missed. By evening, the whispers had started. By the next morning, they'd become a roar. She woke to her mother standing at the foot of her bed, holding a newspaper with shaking hands. "What have you done?" Eliara sat up, her head still fuzzy with sleep and dreams of Adrian's mouth on hers, his hands in her hair, his voice saying mine like it was a sacred oath. "Mother, don't." Her mother's voice cracked. "Don't you dare try to explain this." She threw the paper onto the bed. Eliara picked it up with trembling fingers. The headline was brutal in its simplicity. Arden brothers at war. Duke claims younger brother's cast off. Below it, a detailed account of Caleb's courtship, his sudden abandonment, and Adrian's appearance on her doorstep less than 2 hours later. The writer had been creative with the details, suggesting impropriety, painting Eliara as either a conniving social climber or a naive fool, depending on which paragraph you read. "They're calling you a whore," her mother said flatly. "A fortune hunter. They're saying you seduced one brother, and when he wouldn't marry you, you moved to the next. That's not what happened. It doesn't matter what happened. It matters what they think happened." Her mother's face was pale, drawn. "We're ruined. You've ruined us." The words hit like a physical blow. Eliara's hands clenched on the newspaper, crumpling the cheap paper. "I didn't do anything wrong. You were seen kissing a duke on our front steps. Of course you did something wrong." Her mother's laugh was bitter. "I told you to be careful with them. I told you men like that only bring trouble. Adrian's not. Adrian is a duke who's apparently decided you're his new obsession. Do you have any idea what that means? The scrutiny? The gossip? Every mistake you've ever made will be dragged into the light and examined." Her mother moved to the window, staring out at the street below. "We have callers already. Reporters, gossips. This house will be a circus for weeks." Guilt twisted in Eliara's stomach. She hadn't thought about her family, hadn't considered what her choices would do to them. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Sorry doesn't fix this." Her mother's shoulders sagged. "Get dressed. We need to discuss what happens next." What happened next was a parade of horror. The calling cards came first, not from well-wishers, but from the curious and the cruel. Women Eliara barely knew asking invasive questions about her relationship with both Arden brothers. Men making suggestions that made her skin crawl. Her father, normally absent in his study, emerged long enough to announce he was deeply disappointed before retreating again, unwilling to deal with the mess his daughter had created. And through it all, no word from Adrian. 3 days. 3 days of hell, and the duke who'd claimed her so fiercely on her front steps was nowhere to be found. "He's abandoned you too," her mother said on the third evening, her voice heavy with resignation. "Just like his brother. You should have known better." But Eliara refused to believe it. Couldn't believe it. Adrian had looked her in the eyes and said he didn't run. Had kissed her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. Had promised. The knock at the door came just before midnight. Eliara was still awake, staring at her ceiling, trying to figure out how everything had fallen apart so quickly. She heard the servant's startled voice, the low rumble of a male response, footsteps on the stairs. Then her bedroom door opened, and Adrian walked in. He looked like he'd been through his own personal war. His coat was gone, his shirt partially unlaced, his hair disheveled. But his eyes, Christ, his eyes were blazing with something that made her breath catch. "You didn't come," Eliara said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I've been dealing with my brother." Adrian closed the door behind him, the click of the lock unnaturally loud in the quiet room. And preparing. Preparing for what? This. He crossed to her in 3 strides, pulled her up from the bed, and kissed her hard enough to bruise. Eliara melted into him, 3 days of fear and doubt dissolving under the onslaught of his mouth. He kissed like he was trying to prove something, his hands possessive on her waist, her back, pulling her against him until there was no space between them. "I'm not leaving," he said against her mouth. "I'm not running. I'm not my goddamn brother." "Then where were you?" "Handling things." He pulled back enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. "Caleb tried to convince me this was a mistake, that I was being impulsive, that you'd played us both." Anger flared hot and sharp. "And you believed him?" "No." Adrian's grip tightened fractionally. "I told him to stay the hell out of my life and yours. Then I went to my lawyers and drafted a marriage contract." The world tilted. "A what?" "Marriage contract." His eyes searched hers, intense and unwavering. "I'm not courting you, Eliara. I'm not playing society's games. I'm claiming you, publicly, permanently. You can't just... We barely know each other. I know enough." His thumb brushed her lower lip, the touch sending heat straight through her. "I know you're brave and honest, and you don't back down even when you should. I know you make me feel things I thought I wasn't capable of feeling. I know that 3 days without seeing you felt like 3 years. Adrian, I know you're mine." The words were fierce, possessive, absolute, and I'm done pretending otherwise. Her mind was spinning, trying to process what he was saying. Marriage. He was talking about marriage after 3 weeks of watching her from shadows and 3 days of public scandal. "This is insane," she breathed. "Yes." He smiled, sharp and dangerous. "Say yes anyway." "You're not asking. You're telling. I'm telling you what I want. What I need." His hand slid to her throat. Not squeezing, just resting there. A brand of ownership that made her pulse race. "But I won't force you. If you want me to walk away, I will. I'll disappear from your life, let you rebuild your reputation, find some safe, boring man who'll give you a safe, boring life." "I don't want safe and boring." "Then what do you want?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Eliara knew what she should say, should want. A proper courtship. Time to grieve what she'd lost with Caleb. Space to figure out if what she felt for Adrian was real or just rebound desperation. But standing there in her bedroom at midnight with a duke's hand on her throat and his eyes burning into hers, she couldn't bring herself to care about should. "You," she said. "I want you." Something in Adrian's expression cracked, raw emotion bleeding through the controlled exterior. "Then you have me. All of me. Forever." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, and Eliara felt herself falling into something she couldn't name. His hands moved to her shoulders, her back, pulling her closer as if he could somehow absorb her into himself. "We announce the engagement tomorrow," he said against her mouth. "I've already spoken to your father. He's agreed." That penetrated the haze of desire. Eliara pulled back. "You spoke to my father without telling me?" "I told you. I'm not playing games." Adrian's expression was unapologetic. "Your father was happy to agree once I explained the settlement I was offering. You'll want for nothing. Your family will want for nothing. The scandal will become a romance within a week. You can't just buy me. I'm not buying you. I'm protecting you." His grip tightened. "Society will tear you apart if I don't. This way, you're a duchess in waiting, untouchable, mine." There was that word again. Mine. Possessive and absolute and thrilling in ways that should have terrified her. "What about Caleb?" she asked. Adrian's expression darkened. "What about him?" "He's your brother. This will destroy whatever relationship you have left." "We don't have a relationship. We have a shared bloodline and mutual contempt." He stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides, flexing like he wanted to hit something. "Caleb makes messes. I clean them up. That's how it's always been." "I'm not a mess to clean up." "No." His eyes met hers, softer now, almost vulnerable. "You're the first thing in my life that's mine. Not my titles, not my family's. Mine. And I will burn down anyone who tries to take you from me." The intensity in his voice should have been a warning, should have sent her running. Instead, it made her feel powerful. For 3 years, she'd been invisible, overlooked. forgotten. And now a duke was standing in her bedroom promising to destroy anyone who threatened her. When? She asked. When what? When do we marry? Adrian's smile was predatory. 3 weeks. I've already secured the license. 3 weeks? Her voice rose. People will talk. People are already talking. This way we control the narrative. He moved closer again, crowding her back against the bed. 3 weeks. Then you're mine legally, publicly, irrevocably. His mouth found hers again, and Eliara stopped thinking about timelines and scandal, and everything except the way Adrian touched her like she was something precious and dangerous at the same time. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathing hard. I should go, he said, though he made no move to leave, before I do something that will require us to marry even sooner. Adrian, 3 weeks, Eliara. He pressed one last kiss to her forehead, gentle despite everything else. Then you're mine forever. He was gone before she could respond, slipping out of her room as silently as he had arrived. Eliara stood there in the dark, her lips swollen, her heart racing, trying to process what had just happened. She was engaged, to a duke, to Adrian Arden, who looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth having. 3 weeks. God help her. Atep. The announcement hit society like a bomb. Duke Adrian Arden to wed Lady Eliara Vance, screamed the headlines. The same papers that had called her a whore days earlier now scrambled to rewrite the narrative, painting her as a secret beauty who'd captured the notoriously cold Duke's heart. The transformation was dizzying. Suddenly, Eliara was interesting, desirable, the subject of envious whispers instead of cruel ones. Invitations poured in, balls, dinners, garden parties, everyone wanting to see the woman who'd done the impossible and landed Adrian Arden. Her mother was beside herself with joy and terror in equal measure. A duchess, she kept saying, as if repetition would make it real. My daughter, a duchess. But beneath the excitement there was tension, because Caleb hadn't disappeared. He was everywhere suddenly. At every event Eliara attended, watching from the edges with eyes that held something between regret and resentment. He never approached, never spoke to her directly, but his presence was a constant reminder of what had been and what might have been. And Adrian noticed. He's following you, Adrian said one evening, his hand possessive on her waist as they stood at yet another ball. His voice was low, dangerous. Why? I don't know, Eliara answered honestly. Maybe he regrets his choice. He made his choice. Adrian's grip tightened enough to be just shy of painful. He doesn't get to unmake it now. Across the room, Caleb's eyes met hers. Even at a distance, she could see the pain there, the wanting. It made her chest ache with something complicated. Not quite longing, but not quite indifference either. Dance with me, Adrian said abruptly. We just danced. Then we'll dance again. He pulled her onto the floor, his movements sharp with barely controlled aggression. I want everyone here to know exactly who you belong to. I'm not a possession. Aren't you? His eyes blazed. You're wearing my ring. You're taking my name in 3 weeks. You're in my bed every night in my thoughts. If that's not possession, what is it? The words should have angered her. Instead, they sent heat pooling low in her belly. You're being ridiculous, she said, but her voice was breathless. I'm being honest. Adrian pulled her closer, scandalously close for a waltz. You're mine, Eliara, and I don't share. The music swelled around them, but all Eliara could focus on was the man holding her, the intensity in his eyes, the possessive edge to his touch that made her feel owned and cherished at the same time. The song ended. Adrian didn't let go. Your Grace, a voice interrupted. Cool, familiar, unwelcome. Might I have a word? Caleb stood 3 feet away, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes burning. Adrian's entire body went rigid. No. It wasn't a request for you. It was a request for her. Caleb's gaze shifted to Eliara. Please. 5 minutes. Absolutely not. Adrian's voice was ice. You had your chance. You walked away. She's done with you. Let her decide that. The challenge hung in the air between them, and Eliara could feel the entire ballroom holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen. She should say no, should stand with Adrian, her future husband, the man who'd claimed her so fiercely. But Caleb was looking at her with desperate eyes, and there were things unsaid between them, wounds that needed closing. 5 minutes, she said quietly. Adrian's head snapped toward her, betrayal flashing across his face. Eliara, 5 minutes, Adrian. That's all. She touched his arm, feeling the tension vibrating through him. Please. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse, thought he'd simply drag her away, consequences be damned. Instead, he stepped back, his expression shuddering. 5 minutes, then I'm coming to find you. It wasn't a promise, it was a threat. Caleb led her to a private alcove off the main ballroom, far enough from the crowd to talk, but close enough to maintain propriety. The moment they were alone, his careful composure cracked. Christ, Eliara, what are you doing? Marrying your brother. She kept her voice steady. You were there when it was announced. He's using you to get back at me. The world doesn't revolve around you, Caleb. Doesn't it? His laugh was bitter. I made a mistake. I admit that. I was scared and I ran and I hurt you. But Adrian, he's not doing this because he loves you. He's doing this because I wanted you first. The words hit harder than they should have. You're wrong. Am I? Look at his history. My brother doesn't do relationships. He does transactions, contracts, arrangements that benefit his position and his power. Caleb stepped closer, and she could smell the whiskey on his breath. He saw me with you and decided you were another thing he needed to take from me. That's not true. Then why did he wait until after I ended things? Why didn't he pursue you when I was courting you, if his feelings were so goddamn overwhelming? Caleb's hands clenched at his sides. Because he's a vulture, Eliara. He waits until something's broken, then he swoops in and claims the pieces. Doubt crept in, cold and insidious. Adrian had waited, had watched from shadows while Caleb courted her, only stepping forward after Caleb walked away. He loves me, she said, but her voice wavered. He loves winning. Caleb's expression softened. And I love you. Actually, love you. The kind that doesn't come with conditions or contracts. Her breath caught. You ended things. You said you couldn't commit. I was wrong. I was scared and stupid, and I made the biggest mistake of my life. He reached for her hands, his touch familiar and warm. Come with me. Right now. We'll leave London, go somewhere Adrian's reach doesn't extend. I'll spend every day proving I can be the man you deserve. For one wild moment, Eliara let herself imagine it. Running away with Caleb, starting over somewhere new, being loved without the intensity, without the possessive edge that sometimes felt like it might consume her. But then she remembered Adrian's eyes when he'd said mine, remembered the way he'd stood on her doorstep and declared his feelings without hesitation or fear. Remembered 3 weeks of watching her, learning her, proving through action, not words, that he wanted her. No, she said. Caleb's face crumpled. Eliara, you had your chance, multiple chances, and every time you chose yourself over me. She pulled her hands free. Adrian chose me, publicly, completely. He didn't run. He didn't hesitate. He claimed me, and I'm choosing to let him. He'll destroy you. Maybe. She met his gaze directly. But at least I'll know I mattered enough to destroy. She turned to leave. Caleb's voice stopped her. This isn't over. She looked back. Yes, it is. I love you, Eliara. That doesn't just stop because you're wearing his ring. Then you'll have to learn to live with it. Her voice was cold, final, because in 3 weeks, I'll be his wife. And whatever you think you feel for me, it ends there. She walked away before he could respond, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. Adrian was waiting exactly where she'd left him, his expression carved from stone. What did he say? His voice was controlled, but she could hear the rage underneath. That he made a mistake. That he loves me. That you're using me to hurt him. Adrian's jaw clenched. And what did you say? That I chose you. Something in his expression cracked, relief and possession and triumph bleeding through. He pulled her against him, uncaring of the watching crowd, and kissed her hard enough to erase any lingering doubt. Mine, he said against her mouth. Say it. Yours. Again. I'm yours, Adrian. His smile was fierce, victorious. 3 weeks. Then I'm making sure every person in London knows it. But as they left the ball that night, Eliara caught one last glimpse of Caleb standing in the shadows, watching them with eyes that held promises and threats in equal measure. and she knew, with cold certainty, that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of wedding preparations and escalating tension. Adrian was everywhere, controlling every detail of the ceremony with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to business. The dress. He'd hired the best modiste in London. The venue, his family's cathedral, naturally. The guest list, carefully curated to include everyone who mattered and exclude anyone who'd ever slighted her. "You're being obsessive," Iliara said one afternoon, watching him review seating charts for the third time. "I'm being thorough." He didn't look up. "This wedding will be perfect." "It's just a ceremony." Now he looked up, his eyes sharp. "It's not just a ceremony, it's a statement. It tells everyone in London that you're mine, that you're untouchable, that anyone who tries to hurt you answers to me." The possessiveness should have bothered her. It didn't. After years of being invisible, Adrian's intensity felt like finally being seen. But Caleb was getting desperate. He started sending letters, passionate, pleading things that arrived daily despite Iliara returning them unopened. He appeared at her house, at the modiste shop, at the park where she took her morning walks. "He's stalking you," Adrian said flatly when she mentioned it. "He's hurting." "I don't care." Adrian's expression was ice. "If he doesn't stop, I'll make him stop." "He's your brother." "He's a man who won't accept that he lost." Adrian's hands clenched. "And I will not have him disrupting our wedding because he can't handle rejection." 2 days before the ceremony, things came to a head. Iliara was at the final dress fitting when Caleb appeared in the shop, disheveled and desperate, his eyes wild. "I need to talk to you." The modiste gasped. Iliara's maid started to protest, but Caleb ignored them all, his focus entirely on Iliara. "Please, just listen." Against her better judgment, she nodded to the modiste. "Give us a moment." They left reluctantly. The moment the door closed, Caleb was talking. "Don't marry him." "Caleb, I know what you think, that I'm being selfish, that I had my chance and wasted it." He moved closer, his hands outstretched like he wanted to touch her, but didn't quite dare. "But I've spent 2 weeks in hell watching him parade you around like a trophy, and I can't do this anymore." "You don't have a choice." "Neither do you." His voice dropped. "He's not who you think he is, Iliara. Adrian doesn't love, he possesses. He controls. And once you're his wife, there's no escape." "I don't want to escape." "You will. Give it a year, maybe less. You'll wake up one day and realize you're in a beautiful cage, and the man holding the key will never let you out." The words burrowed under her skin, finding every doubt she'd tried to suppress. Was Caleb right? Was Adrian's love just possession dressed up in prettier language? "I'm not having this conversation," she said. "Then have this one. Do you love him?" The question stopped her cold. Did she? She cared for Adrian, was drawn to him, felt something when he touched her that she'd never felt with anyone else. But was it love? "I don't know," she admitted. "Then don't marry him." Caleb's voice was urgent now, desperate. "Not until you know. Not until you're sure." "The wedding's in 2 days." "Then we have 2 days." He reached for her hands, and this time she let him take them. "Run away with me, tonight. We'll go to Scotland, get married there. By the time Adrian figures out what happened, it'll be too late." "You're asking me to jilt a duke." "I'm asking you to choose yourself." His grip tightened. "Choose the man who actually loves you, not the one who just wants to win." The door slammed open. Adrian stood in the doorway, and the expression on his face was murder. "Get your hands off my fiancé." The words were quiet, controlled, and absolutely terrifying. Caleb didn't let go. "Or what? You'll challenge me to a duel? How very dramatic." "I'll ruin you." Adrian stepped into the room, and suddenly the space felt too small. "Every club, every investment, every connection you have, gone. I'll make sure you're a pariah in every corner of London and beyond." "You can't. I'm a duke. I can do whatever the hell I want." Adrian's eyes were cold, flat, devoid of anything resembling mercy. "Now get your goddamn hands off my wife. She's not your wife yet. She will be, in 2 days. Adrian turned his gaze to Iliara, and the intensity there made her breath catch. "Won't you?" It was a test, a challenge, a demand for public loyalty. Iliara looked between the two brothers, Caleb desperate and pleading, Adrian cold and commanding. and knew that whatever choice she made in this moment would define everything that came after. "Yes," she said, pulling her hands free from Caleb's grip. "I will." Caleb's face went white. "Eliara, I made my choice." She crossed to Adrian, felt his arm immediately wrap around her waist, claiming and possessive. "I'm marrying Adrian, and you need to accept that." For a moment, Caleb just stood there, looking like she'd driven a knife into his chest. Then his expression hardened into something she'd never seen before, rage mixed with bitter determination. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "Is that a threat?" Adrian's voice was deadly soft. "It's a promise." Caleb's eyes met Eliara's one last time. "When he shows you who he really is, and he will, don't say I didn't warn you." He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence that followed was suffocating. "Are you all right?" Adrian's hand cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. "I don't know." "Did he hurt you?" "No, he just—" She trailed off, unsure how to explain the doubts Caleb had planted. "What did he say?" She could lie. Should lie. But Adrian was looking at her with those intense gray eyes, and she found she couldn't. "He said you don't love me, that you just want to possess me." Adrian went very still. "And you believe him?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." His hand dropped. He stepped back, and the distance felt like miles. 2 days before our wedding, and you don't know what you believe." His laugh was hollow. "Maybe Caleb's right. Maybe I am just possession to you." "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." He turned away, his shoulders rigid. "I've spent weeks proving myself to you, claiming you publicly, arranging everything to protect you, to honor you, to make you happy, and you still think I'm just playing games." "Adrian, do you want to marry me, Eliara?" He turned back, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest ache. "Actually want it? Not because it's expected, or because the invitations are sent, or because you're afraid of scandal. Do you want to be my wife?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. This was it. The moment of truth. The point where she either committed fully or walked away. Eliara thought about the past month. About Adrian watching her from shadows, learning her, choosing her. About the way he touched her like she was precious. About the intensity in his eyes when he said mine. About the way being with him made her feel powerful instead of invisible. "Yes," she said. "I want to marry you. Even though my love feels like possession, especially because of that." She moved closer, taking his hand. "I've been overlooked my entire life, and you look at me like I'm the only thing that matters. That doesn't feel like possession. It feels like being wanted." Something in Adrian's expression cracked, relief and need flooding through. He pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that tasted like desperation and promise. 2 days, he said against her lips. "Then you're mine legally, and I'm never letting you go." "I know. I'll probably be overbearing and controlling and impossible." "I know that too." His laugh was rough, almost pained. "And you still want this?" "I still want this." She kissed him back, fierce and certain. "I want you." He held her like she might disappear, his hands possessive on her waist, her back, his mouth claiming hers with an intensity that left no room for doubt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "If Caleb tries anything at the wedding, he won't." "You don't know that." "Then we'll deal with it." She met his eyes. Together. His smile was small, almost fragile. Together. He left soon after, and Eliara finished her fitting in a daze. But as she stood in front of the mirror wearing the beautiful gown Adrian had commissioned, she couldn't shake Caleb's words. "When he shows you who he really is, and he will, don't say I didn't warn you." 2 days. In 2 days, she'd be Duchess Eliara Arden, wife to the most powerful man in London, bound to him legally and publicly. And despite her certainty, despite her choice, a small part of her wondered if Caleb was right, if Adrian's love would feel like freedom or just a more beautiful cage. She'd find out soon enough. The wedding day dawned cold and clear. Eliara woke before sunrise, her stomach a knot of nerves and anticipation. In a few hours, she'd walk down the aisle of the Arden family cathedral and bind herself to a man who terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. No word from Caleb, no last-minute pleas or dramatic gestures. Maybe he'd finally accepted defeat. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. By noon, Eliara was dressed, her hair arranged in an elaborate style that must have taken her maid hours to perfect. The gown was stunning. White silk and lace fitted perfectly to her frame, with a train that would require 2 attendants to manage. She looked like a duchess. She looked like someone who mattered. "You're beautiful," her mother said, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, my darling girl, you're so beautiful." Eliara squeezed her hand, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The carriage ride to the cathedral was a blur. Crowds lined the streets. Apparently a duke's wedding was a public spectacle, and Eliara forced herself to smile and wave like she'd been born to this instead of thrust into it. The cathedral was massive, intimidating, filled with everyone who mattered in London society. Eliara's hands shook as she waited in the vestibule, listening to the music swell inside. This was it. No turning back now. The doors opened. The music shifted to the wedding march, and Eliara began the long walk down the aisle on her father's arm. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't see the curious faces or the envious glares. Her eyes found Adrian at the altar, tall and severe in his formal wear, and the rest of the world fell away. He was watching her like she was the only person in the cathedral, like she was the only person in the world. "Mine," his expression said. "Finally, mine." Halfway down the aisle, Eliara saw Caleb. He stood in one of the back pews, perfectly positioned to watch the ceremony, his face a mask of controlled anguish. Their eyes met for just a moment, and she saw everything he wanted to say, all the protests he was swallowing. Then she looked away, back to Adrian, and kept walking. The ceremony itself was a blur of traditional vows and binding promises. Adrian's voice was steady as he pledged himself to her. Hers shook slightly, but she got through it. The ring, heavy gold, inscribed with words she couldn't quite read, slid onto her finger with finality. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the officiant intoned. "You may kiss your bride." Adrian pulled her against him and kissed her like he was trying to brand her, his mouth claiming hers with possessive intensity. The crowd erupted in applause, but Eliara barely heard it over the pounding of her heart. She was married. She was a duchess. She was his. The reception was held at Adrian's London estate, a sprawling mansion that made her family's home look like a cottage. Hundreds of guests, endless champagne, congratulations from people she'd never met and probably never would again. Through it all, Adrian kept her close, his hand possessive on her waist, his attention unwavering. "Happy?" he asked during a rare quiet moment. "Overwhelmed," she admitted. "Good overwhelmed or bad overwhelmed?" "I'm not sure yet." His laugh was low, intimate. "You'll figure it out. You have the rest of your life." The rest of her life. With him. The weight of that settled over her like a cloak, not heavy exactly, but present. Undeniable. The evening wore on. Guests danced and drank and celebrated. Adrian waltzed with her twice, each time holding her closer than propriety allowed, making it clear to everyone watching that he wasn't just proud of his new wife, he was obsessed with her. It should have been perfect. It was perfect. Until Caleb appeared at her elbow during a moment when Adrian had stepped away to speak with some political connection. "One dance," he said quietly, "for old time's sake. Caleb, please, just one. Then I'll leave, I promise." She should refuse, should find Adrian and let him handle his brother's persistence. But there was something in Caleb's eyes, a desperate sadness that tugged at the part of her that had once cared for him. "One dance," she agreed. "That's all." He led her onto the floor as a waltz began, his hand settling on her waist with familiar ease. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "Don't." "I'm just stating a fact." His smile was sad. "The most beautiful bride I've ever seen, wearing another man's ring." "Caleb, please." "I won't make a scene. I promised." He spun her through a turn. "I just wanted one last moment, one last memory of what could have been. We can't go back." "I know." His grip tightened slightly. "But I also can't watch you throw your life away on a man who'll never love you the way I do." "He loves me in his way. His way is possession, control." Caleb's voice dropped. "I love you, Eliara, completely, without conditions. And if you ever need to escape him, if you ever realize I was right, I'll be waiting." Before she could respond, the music ended, and she looked up to find Adrian standing at the edge of the dance floor, his expression carved from ice, his eyes promising violence. "Thank you for the dance, Lady Arden," Caleb said formally, releasing her. Then, quieter, just for her. "I meant what I said. I'll be waiting." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Eliara turned to face her husband, her heart in her throat. Adrian didn't say a word, just took her arm, his grip just shy of painful, and led her off the dance floor, through the crowd, out of the ballroom entirely. He didn't stop until they were in his private study, the door locked behind them, the sounds of the party muted to distant noise. Then he turned on her, and the fury in his eyes made her step back. "What," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "did he say to you?" "Nothing. It was just a dance." "Don't lie to me." He moved closer, backing her against the desk. "I saw his face. I saw yours." "What did he say?" Eliara's pulse was racing, her hands shaking. She'd never seen Adrian like this, all his control stripped away, leaving raw, violent emotion. "He said he loves me, that he'll be waiting if I ever want to leave you." Adrian's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking dangerously. "And what did you say?" "Nothing. The dance ended." "But you were tempted." "It wasn't a question." "You heard him say he'd wait, and part of you was glad." "No." "Yes." His hand slammed down on either side of her, trapping her against the desk. "You're my wife. Mine. And you're already thinking about escape routes." "That's not true, isn't it?" His face was inches from hers now, his breath hot against her mouth. "You married me 3 hours ago, and you're already letting my brother plant doubts. Tell me, Eliara, did you mean those vows, or were they just pretty words you said because the alternative was scandal?" Tears burned her eyes. "I meant them. Then prove it." His hand slid to her throat, not squeezing, just resting there, a claim and a threat. "Tell me you're mine. Not because society says so, not because there's a ring on your finger. Tell me you're mine because you choose to be." She could barely breathe, his presence overwhelming, his intensity drowning her. This was Adrian unleashed, no masks, no control, just raw possessive need. And God help her, it was exactly what she wanted. "I'm yours," she whispered. Again. "I'm yours, Adrian. Completely." His mouth crashed into hers, the kiss brutal and claiming, teeth and tongue and possession that left no room for doubt. He lifted her onto the desk, his hands pushing up her silk skirts, his body pressing between her legs. "Mine," he said against her mouth. "Say it." "Yours. Forever. Forever." He kissed her like he was trying to erase every moment Caleb had ever touched her, every word he'd ever said, every doubt he'd ever planted. And Eliara kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his hair, pulling him closer. A knock at the door made them both freeze. "Your Grace?" A servant's hesitant voice. "The guests are asking for you." Adrian pulled back, his eyes still blazing. "Tell them we'll be out shortly." Footsteps retreated. Adrian straightened Eliara's dress with shaking hands, his jaw tight. "This isn't over," he said. "I know. Caleb won't stop, not until I make him. Adrian, he threatened my marriage on my wedding day." Adrian's expression was cold, calculating. "That's not something I forgive." Fear spiked through her. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever I have to." He helped her down from the desk, smoothed her hair, to protect what's mine. They returned to the party, and if anyone noticed Eliara's flushed face or Adrian's possessive grip on her waist, they were too polite to mention it. But across the room, Eliara caught sight of Caleb one last time. He was watching them, his expression unreadable. And she knew with cold certainty that despite everything, despite the vows, despite the consummation still to come, despite her choice, this war between the Arden brothers was far from. The wedding night should have been perfect. Adrian's estate had been prepared with meticulous care, candles lit in their private chambers, rose petals scattered across silk sheets, champagne chilling in crystal buckets. Every detail designed to seduce, to claim, to mark the beginning of their life together. But Eliara couldn't shake the image of Caleb's face as he'd watched them leave the ballroom. The knowing look in his eyes, like he was waiting for something inevitable to happen. "You're thinking about him," Adrian said. They were alone now, the last guests finally departed, standing in the enormous master bedroom that would be theirs. Adrian had removed his jacket, his cravat, but the tension in his shoulders suggested he was anything but relaxed. "I'm thinking about what he said," Eliara admitted. "Which part? The part where he declared his undying love, or the part where he promised to wait for you to leave me?" The bitterness in his voice cut deep. "Adrian, no." He turned to face her, and the rawness in his expression stole her breath. "I need to know right now, before we consummate this marriage, if you're going to spend our entire life together looking over your shoulder at my brother." "I'm not." "Are you in love with him?" The question landed like a slap. Eliara's hands clenched in the silk of her gown. "What?" "Simple question. Are you in love with Caleb?" Adrian's eyes were ice and fire at once. "Because I can live with a lot of things. I can live with you choosing me for the wrong reasons. I can live with you learning to love me over time. But I cannot, will not, share you with the ghost of what you had with him. I'm not in love with Caleb." "Then what are you?" "Confused, overwhelmed, trying to process that 3 months ago I was invisible, and now I'm married to a duke who looks at me like I'm the only thing keeping him alive." Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to be what you need me to be." Adrian crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that contradicted the intensity in his eyes. "I need you to be honest, that's all. I need you to tell me when you're scared or uncertain or regretting this choice. I need you to trust me enough to be real." "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Of me?" "Of this. Of what happens when the intensity fades and you realize I'm just ordinary." His laugh was rough, almost pained. "Eliara, there is nothing ordinary about you. You think I pursued you because you were convenient? Because you were available?" His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I pursued you because you're the first woman who's ever looked at me and seen a man instead of a title. Because you challenge me. Because being near you feels like finally being able to breathe." The words should have reassured her. Instead, they made the knot in her chest tighten. What if Caleb's right? What if this is just possession dressed up as love? Adrian went very still. "Do you believe that?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." He stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides. The distance felt like miles. "Then perhaps we should wait, until you're certain." "Wait for what?" "To consummate the marriage." His voice was controlled, but she could hear the pain underneath. "Until you're sure you want this. Want me. Not as an obligation or a lesser evil, but as your actual choice." Eliara stared at him, shocked. "You're my husband." "Legally. But I won't take what you're not ready to give freely." He moved to the door, his posture rigid. "I'll sleep in the guest chambers tonight. When you're ready, if you're ready, you know where to find me." "Adrian, wait!" But he was already gone, the door closing with a soft click that felt more final than any slam. Eliara stood alone in the enormous bedroom, still wearing her wedding gown, trying to process what had just happened. Her husband had walked out on their wedding night rather than touch a wife who wasn't certain. It should have felt like rejection. Instead, it felt like the most loving thing anyone had ever done for her. She found him an hour later. The guest chambers were smaller than the master bedroom, but still ridiculously luxurious. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, still partially dressed, his head in his hands. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. "Eliara." "I'm certain," she said. He stood slowly, his eyes searching hers. "You don't have to." "I'm certain," she repeated, crossing to him. "Not because I have to be. Because I am. I choose you, Adrian, completely. No reservations." His hands came up to frame her face, trembling slightly. "You're sure?" "Kiss me and find out." He did. And whatever doubts had lingered between them burned away in the heat of his mouth on hers, his hands learning the shape of her through expensive silk, his voice rough as he whispered promises against her skin. The wedding night that followed was everything it should have been: passion and tenderness, claiming and surrender, 2 people finally allowing themselves to be completely vulnerable with each other. After lying tangled in sheets that smelled like him, Eliara felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was real. Whatever games Caleb was playing, whatever doubts he'd planted, they didn't matter. She'd made her choice, and she was keeping it. The first week of marriage passed in a haze of new routines and shocking intimacy. Adrian was nothing like she'd expected. At home, away from society's eyes, he was softer, gentler. He'd spent hours just talking with her, asking about her thoughts on everything from literature to politics. He brought her tea in the mornings, kissed her forehead when he thought she was sleeping, looked at her across the breakfast table like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You're staring," she said one morning, fighting a smile. "I'm appreciating." His eyes were warm over the rim of his coffee cup. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "One is creepy. One is husbandly devotion." His smile was devastating. "I'm choosing to believe mine falls into the latter category." She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Maybe this would work. Maybe they could build something real despite the chaos of how they'd started. Then the letter arrived. It came by private messenger, sealed with unfamiliar wax, addressed to the Duchess of Arden in elegant script. Eliara opened it at breakfast while Adrian was reviewing correspondence from his steward. The first line made her blood run cold. "Your Grace, there are things about your husband you deserve to know." No signature, no return address, just 3 pages of detailed, devastating accusations. Adrian had orchestrated everything from the beginning. The chance encounter at the ball, he'd paid the host to ensure she'd be there. Caleb's interest, Adrian had suggested her name, knowing his brother's weakness for broken things. The courtship, the abandonment, Adrian's perfectly timed confession, all of it planned, choreographed, designed to make her feel special while ensuring she ended up exactly where Adrian wanted her. As his wife, his possession, his trophy won from his brother. The letter included dates, times, names of servants who'd been bribed, copies of correspondence between Adrian and various society figures, all working to manipulate events in his favor. Every moment she'd thought was real had been theater. Every choice she'd thought was hers had been illusion. Adrian had played her like a piece on a chessboard. "Eliara, you've gone pale. What is it?" She looked up at her husband, this man she'd given everything to, and felt her entire world crack apart. "Is it true?" Her voice was barely a whisper. His expression shifted, confusion giving way to wariness. "Is what true?" She threw the letter at him. It landed in his eggs, pages spreading across the table, ink bleeding in the yolk. Adrian picked up the first page, his face draining of color as he read. The silence that followed was absolute. "Where did you get this?" His voice was careful, controlled. "Does it matter? Is it true?" "Eliara, is it true?" She was standing now, shaking with rage and betrayal, and a grief so deep it felt like drowning. "Did you orchestrate this entire thing? Did you manipulate me into marrying you?" Adrian set down the page with deliberate care. When he looked at her, his eyes were shuttered, unreadable. "It's more complicated than... It's a yes or no question," her voice cracked. "Did you plan this?" A pause. Then, "Yes." The word hit like a physical blow. Eliara stumbled back, her hand finding the edge of the sideboard to keep herself upright. "Caleb was right," she breathed. "He was right about everything." "No, he wasn't." Adrian stood, moving toward her. "Listen to me. Don't touch me." She held up a hand and he stopped as if she'd struck him. "Don't you dare touch me. The letter isn't wrong about the facts, but it's wrong about the why." His words came faster now, desperate. "Yes, I ensured you were at that ball. Yes, I suggested your name to Caleb, but not because I wanted to manipulate you, because I'd seen you, months before, at Lady Morrison's garden party, and I couldn't get you out of my head." "So you decided to play God with my life?" "I decided to create an opportunity." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture agitated. "You were invisible, Eliara. No one saw you. No one would ever see you unless someone forced them to look. So I did. By using your brother as bait. By giving you a chance you'd never have otherwise." His eyes were intense, pleading. "I knew Caleb would lose interest. He always does. But I also knew that having his attention, even briefly, would put you on society's radar, would make you visible. And then you could swoop in and play the hero." Bile rose in her throat. "Save the poor abandoned girl from humiliation. How noble." "That's not..." He moved closer, and she backed away. "I fell in love with you, Eliara. Actually, genuinely fell in love. That wasn't part of any plan. How am I supposed to believe anything you say? How do I know any of this?" She gestured between them, her hand shaking. "Is real, and not just another manipulation?" Because I'm telling you the truth now. Now. After I found out. After I have proof of your lies. Tears were streaming down her face now, hot and bitter. Did you ever plan to tell me? Or were you just going to let me live in blissful ignorance, thinking I'd been chosen instead of hunted? Adrian flinched like she'd slapped him. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. Make it make sense. He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. I saw you at that garden party 6 months ago. You were standing alone, reading a book you'd tried to hide when someone passed. And I thought, here's someone real. Someone who doesn't care about being seen because she's already given up on it. That's not romantic, that's predatory. It's honest. His hands clenched at his sides. I wanted to approach you then, but I'm a duke. Everything I do is scrutinized, politicized. If I'd pursued you directly, society would have torn you apart trying to figure out what game I was playing, so I found another way. Using your brother. Giving you visibility. Caleb was never meant to hurt you. But he did. Her voice broke. He made me care about him, and then he walked away. And it destroyed me. And you. You watched it happen. You probably planned for it to happen. No. Adrian stepped forward, and this time she didn't retreat. I underestimated how much he'd make you feel. How deeply it would cut when he left. That part. That wasn't supposed to happen. So your plan went wrong, and you just adjusted. She laughed, the sound bitter and broken. How flexible of you. I adjusted because I couldn't watch you hurt anymore. His voice was fierce now, desperate. Every day of those 3 weeks, watching him court you, watching you smile at him, watching you start to care. It was torture. And when he finally did what I knew he'd do, when he broke your heart, all I wanted was to put you back together. So you could own the pieces. The accusation hung between them, sharp and true. Adrian's expression crumbled. So I could love them. All of them. The broken parts and the strong parts and everything in between. I don't believe you. Then what do you believe? His voice was ragged. Tell me what you think happened. Tell me your version. Eliara's breath came in sharp gasps, her vision blurred with tears. I think you're a man who's so used to controlling everything that you couldn't stand the idea of leaving something as important as your wife to chance. I think you orchestrated an elaborate manipulation because the alternative, actually courting me honestly, was too unpredictable. I think you wanted me, and you decided the best way to get me was to break me first. That's not true, isn't it? She grabbed one of the pages from the table, her hands shaking. This has a copy of a letter you wrote to the Rothmore's butler, offering him £50 to ensure I was positioned near the ballroom entrance the night Caleb was supposed to arrive. £50 to make sure I was in the right place at the right time to be noticed. Adrian's silence was answer enough. Every moment I thought was fate was just you pulling strings. Her voice was hollow now, drained of everything but pain. Every choice I thought was mine was just me following your script. I'm not your wife. I'm your puppet. No. Was last week real? The question came out broken. The mornings, the conversations, the way you touched me? Was any of it real, or was that just the next phase of the plan? Adrian moved so fast she didn't have time to react. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but not painful, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were wild, desperate, and for the first time since she'd known him, completely unguarded. Last week was the most real thing in my entire life. His voice was raw. Every kiss, every word, every moment, that wasn't a plan. That was me being terrified and grateful and completely overwhelmed that you'd actually chosen me. But the choice wasn't real. She was crying openly now. You made sure I'd choose you. You engineered it. I created the opportunity. You made the choice. His hands tightened fractionally. On our wedding day, when Caleb offered you an escape, you could have taken it. You didn't. That was real. That was you. How do I know you didn't plan that too? How do I know Caleb's offer wasn't just another test you orchestrated? Adrian's face went white. You think I'd... Jesus, Eliara, I'm controlling, not insane. I didn't script my brother's desperation. But you used it. She pulled free from his grip, stumbling back. You used him. You used me. You used everyone around us to get what you wanted. And now I'm supposed to just accept that your feelings are genuine when literally everything else was a lie? Not everything, Yoshi o yogi gots. Enough! The word ripped from her throat, loud enough to make him stop mid-sentence. I can't do this. I can't stand here and parse out which pieces of our relationship were real and which were manipulation. I can't! Her breath came in gasps. The room was spinning. She needed air, space, something other than Adrian's presence suffocating her with explanations that somehow made everything worse. I need to leave, she said. Leave the room or leave the marriage? The question was quiet, but it landed like a boulder. Eliara looked at her husband, this man who'd claimed to love her, who'd orchestrated her entire life for months without her knowledge, who was staring at her now like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth, and felt nothing but a vast, aching emptiness. I don't know, she whispered. Adrian's face crumbled. Eliara, I need time. I need space. I need to figure out what's real and what was theater. She moved toward the door, each step feeling like wading through deep water. Don't follow me. Where are you going? I don't know, somewhere you aren't. She was halfway out the door when his voice stopped her. I love you. She didn't turn around. How am I supposed to believe that when everything else was a lie? It's not a lie. It's the only true thing I have. Eliara's hand tightened on the door frame. Then you should have led with truth instead of manipulation. She left him standing in the breakfast room, surrounded by cold eggs and damning evidence, and ran. Nuts. She went to the only place she could think of. Her family's townhouse was small, cramped, nothing like Adrian's sprawling estate. But it was familiar, and right now she needed familiar more than she needed luxury. Her mother took one look at her tear-stained face and pulled her inside without questions. What happened? Eliara couldn't answer, couldn't form words around the grief clogging her throat. She just handed over the letter and watched her mother's face drain of color as she read. Oh, darling. Her mother's voice was soft, pitying. Oh, my poor girl. He manipulated me. The words came out flat, empty. From the very beginning, nothing was real. Her mother set down the letter carefully. What are you going to do? I don't know. Eliara sank into a chair, her wedding ring heavy on her finger. I'm married to him, legally bound, but how do I stay with someone who's been lying to me for months? Perhaps he's telling the truth about his feelings. How would I know? How would I ever know? She looked at her mother, desperate for answers. Every tender moment, every declaration, how do I trust any of it when the foundation was manipulation? Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then, you don't. The words were brutal in their simplicity. You can't trust him, her mother continued. Not now, maybe not ever, but you're a duchess, Eliara. You have power, position, protection. Walking away means losing all of that. So I should stay in a marriage built on lies for the sake of power? I'm saying you need to think practically. Her mother's expression was hard, pragmatic. Love is wonderful when it works. But when it doesn't, you need something to fall back on. Adrian gave you wealth, status, security. That's worth something. It's worth my self-respect. It's worth your survival. Her mother leaned forward. You think you can just leave? Go back to being invisible Lady Eliara Vance? Society doesn't work that way. You're the Duchess of Arden now. If you walk away, they'll destroy you. They'll say you were a fortune hunter who got cold feet. They'll make you a cautionary tale. The truth of it settled like lead in Eliara's stomach. Her mother was right. There was no going back. She'd married Adrian, and whether that marriage was built on truth or manipulation, she was stuck with the consequences. So what do I do? She asked quietly. You decide what you can live with. Her mother's voice was gentle now. And you make him earn back what he broke. A knock at the door interrupted them. The butler appeared, looking nervous. My lady, there's a gentleman here to see Lady Eliara. He says it's urgent. I'm not receiving visitors, Eliara said. He was quite insistent. A Mr. Caleb Arden. The name made her stomach drop. Tell him I'm not... Please, Caleb's voice carried from the hallway. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Her mother's eyes narrowed. Send him away. But Eliara was already standing. Let him in. Eliara, he warned me. From the beginning, he warned me about Adrian. The least I can do is hear what he has to say. Caleb entered the sitting room looking haggard, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes went immediately to Eliara, concern and something darker flashing across his features. "You got the letter," he said. The room went cold. "You sent it." Not a question, a statement. Caleb had the decency to look guilty. "I had to. You deserve to know the truth. And you just happen to have detailed documentation of your brother's manipulations? Copies of correspondence? Exact dates and times?" Eliara's voice was ice. "How long have you been collecting evidence, Caleb?" "Does it matter? It's true. All of it. It matters because this isn't about protecting me. This is about hurting him." She took a step toward him, fury replacing grief. "You couldn't have me, so you decided to burn down my marriage instead." "Your marriage is already burned." Caleb's expression hardened. "Adrian built it on lies. I just showed you the foundation. By violating his privacy, by gathering evidence like you were building a legal case." Another step. "Tell me something. Did you actually love me? Or was I just another battlefield in whatever war you're fighting with your brother?" Caleb flinched. "I love you. I've always loved you." "You have a terrible way of showing it," Eliara's voice cracked. "If you loved me, you would have let me figure this out on my own. You would have given me the dignity of making my own choices instead of forcing your version of truth on me. I saved you from him. No, you used me against him. There's a difference." She moved to the door, opening it. "Get out." "Eliara, get out, Caleb, and don't come back. I'm done being a pawn for the Arden brothers." He left, but not before saying one last thing. "When you're ready to leave him, and you will be, I'll be waiting." The door closed behind him. Eliara stood there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Both brothers had manipulated her. Both had used her for their own purposes. Both claimed to love her while treating her like a chess piece instead of a person. "What are you going to do?" her mother asked quietly. Eliara looked down at her wedding ring, this symbol of a marriage built on deception and maintained through manipulation. Then she made a decision. "I'm going back. To Adrian, to my husband." The words tasted bitter. "But on my terms this time. If I'm going to be the Duchess of Arden, then I'm going to be a duchess Adrian can't control, can't manipulate, can't predict." Her mother's smile was small, proud. "What's your plan?" "I don't have one yet." Eliara straightened her shoulders, feeling something shift inside her. "But I'm done being the wallflower who waits to be chosen. From now on, I do the choosing." She returned to Adrian's estate that evening. He was in his study, surrounded by papers and ledgers, but clearly not working. He looked up when she entered, hope and fear warring on his face. "Eliara." "I'm staying," she said, cutting him off, "but we're renegotiating our marriage." He stood slowly. "What do you mean?" "I mean you manipulated me into this union. Fine. I can't change that, but I can change what happens next." She moved to his desk, bracing her hands on the polished wood. "You want a wife? You have one. But she's not the grateful, besotted girl you thought you were getting." "What do you want?" "Honesty. Complete, brutal honesty from this point forward. No more secrets, no more orchestrations. If you have a plan that involves me, I know about it. If you're manipulating someone, I know about it. Full transparency, or I walk and damn the scandal." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Agreed. I want separate chambers." That made him flinch. "Eliara, shut. I'm not sharing a bed with someone I don't trust. If I decide I can trust you again, I'll come to you. Until then, we maintain separate sleeping arrangements." "Fine." The word was forced. "What else?" "I want access to your accounts, your correspondence, your business dealings. If I'm going to be your duchess, I'm going to actually be your partner, not your pretty accessory." He stopped, clearly fighting himself. "That's unconventional. So is our entire relationship." She met his eyes directly. "Those are my terms. Accept them, or I leave tonight, and let society make of it what they will." The silence stretched. Adrian looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, not the invisible wallflower or the grateful bride, but someone else entirely, someone who'd been forged in the fire of his betrayal and come out harder, sharper, more dangerous. "You've changed," he said quietly. "You changed me." She smiled, bitter. "Congratulations. You broke the sweet girl who would have loved you unconditionally. Now you get to deal with what's left." "And what's left?" "A woman who knows exactly what men like you are capable of." Eliara straightened, her posture regal. A woman who won't make the mistake of trusting blindly again. Adrian moved around the desk, stopping close enough to touch, but not reaching for her. His eyes searched hers, and whatever he saw there made his expression crack. "I'm sorry," he said, and the rawness in his voice was undeniable. "I'm sorry for manipulating you, for lying, for thinking I had the right to orchestrate your life. You deserved better." "Yes, I did." She didn't look away. "But this is what I got. So now we figure out how to move forward." "Can we? Move forward?" "I don't know." The honesty hurt, but she forced it out anyway. "Maybe. If you prove that you can love me without controlling me, that you can want me without owning me." "I can try." "Try isn't good enough." Her voice was steel. "You either do it or you don't. And if you can't, then this marriage becomes a business arrangement. We maintain appearances, fulfill our social obligations, and live separate lives. That's not what I want." "Then earn what you want." She moved past him, heading for the door. "My terms stand. Accept them or don't. I'll be in the East Wing." She was almost to the door when his voice stopped her. "Caleb sent the letter." She turned. "I know. Are you going to see him again?" "Why? Are you worried I'll choose him over you?" Adrian's expression was raw, vulnerable. "Yes." The admission hung between them, honest and painful. Eliara studied her husband, this man who'd broken her trust but was now standing before her stripped of all pretense, and felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of understanding. "I'm not going to choose Caleb," she said quietly, "but I'm not choosing you either. Not yet. Not until you prove I can trust you with that choice." "How do I prove it?" "That's your problem to solve." She opened the door. "You're good at plans, Adrian. Figure this one out." She left him standing in his study, and this time she didn't look back. The next weeks were a strange dance of proximity and distance. They attended social events together, presented a united front to society, played the part of devoted newlyweds. But at home, they were strangers circling each other warily, neither willing to make the first move toward reconciliation. Adrian honored her terms. He gave her access to everything: his accounts, his correspondence, his business meetings. She attended strategy sessions with his advisors, reviewed contracts, learned the intricacies of managing a dukedom. He held nothing back, and slowly, grudgingly, she began to see the man beneath the manipulation. He was brilliant, ruthless when necessary, but also capable of unexpected kindness, funding charities anonymously, helping struggling tenants, using his influence to protect those with none. "Why do you do it?" she asked one evening, reviewing a ledger that showed substantial donations to a women's shelter. "Do what?" "This." She gestured to the numbers. "You're giving away a fortune and no one even knows." Adrian looked uncomfortable. "Recognition isn't the point." "Then what is?" "Making things better. Using what I have to help those who don't." He met her eyes. "I can't control everything, but the things I can control, I try to use them well." It was the most honest thing he'd said in weeks. Eliara found herself watching him more carefully after that, studying the way he handled problems, treated servants, negotiated conflicts. And slowly, against her better judgment, she began to see what she'd missed before. Adrian didn't just manipulate for power. He manipulated because control was the only way he knew how to protect the things he cared about. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it. Then, 3 weeks after the letter, everything changed again. She was in the library when Adrian burst in, his face pale, a piece of paper clutched in his hand. "What's wrong?" She was on her feet immediately. "Caleb," his voice was hoarse, "he's challenged me to a duel." The world tilted. "What?" "He claims I dishonored you through manipulation, that you deserve the chance to be free of me, and the only way to settle it is—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Eliara grabbed the paper from his hand, scanning the formal language. It was all there. Date, time, location, seconds, weapons, a duel, an actual, illegal, potentially fatal duel. "He's insane," she breathed. "He's desperate." Adrian's hands were shaking. "And he's an excellent shot. So am I." At her shocked look, he added, "I won't miss, Eliara. If it comes down to him or me, I'll kill him. And I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life." She looked at the man in front of her, flawed, manipulative, but also capable of anguish at the thought of killing his own brother, and felt something inside her break open. "Don't go," she said. "I have to. If I refuse, I'm a coward, and the challenge stands until one of us—" He stopped, his jaw clenched. "I have to go. Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. He's doing this because of me, because he thinks he's saving me from you." She grabbed Adrian's arm, forcing him to look at her. "So I'm going to be there, and I'm going to end this. My way." "Eliara, those are my terms." She smiled, bitter. "You're good at accepting terms, Adrian. Accept these." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just nodded, his expression resigned. 2 days, he said quietly. Dawn, Hyde Park. 2 days to figure out how to stop two brothers from killing each other over a woman who didn't fully trust either of them. 2 days to decide who she really was, the wallflower who waited to be saved, or the duchess who saved herself. Eliara looked at her husband, at the fear and determination warring in his eyes, and made a choice. "Adrian?" "Yes?" "When this is over, when Caleb is dealt with and the dust settles, I want to try." His breath caught. "Try what?" "To trust you again, to build something real." She moved closer, close enough to feel his heat. "But you have to survive first, so don't you dare let him kill you." "I won't. And don't you dare kill him either, because if you do, I'll never forgive you." The impossibility of the demand hung between them. Don't die, don't kill. Somehow find a way to end this that doesn't destroy everything. "I'll find a way," Adrian said, and she heard the oath beneath the words. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, tasting fear and hope in equal measure. When they broke apart, both were shaking. 2 days, she whispered. 2 days, he agreed. And Eliara knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever happened in Hyde Park would change everything. Either she'd lose one of the Arden brothers to death, or she'd finally be free of both of them. The question was which outcome would break her more, and whether she had the strength to. The night before the duel, Eliara couldn't sleep. She lay in her separate chambers staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. Somewhere in the East Wing, Adrian was probably doing the same thing, preparing himself mentally for the possibility that tomorrow he'd either kill his brother or die trying. The clock struck 2, then 3. At 4, she gave up on sleep entirely and rose, wrapping a robe around herself and padding barefoot through the silent corridors. She found Adrian in the weapons room. He stood with his back to her, a dueling pistol in his hand, checking the mechanism with practiced movements. He was still fully dressed despite the hour, his shirt untucked, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "You should be sleeping," he said without turning around. "So should you." He set down the pistol, finally facing her. He looked exhausted, haunted, like a man staring into his own grave. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see—" "Don't!" She crossed to him, stopping just out of reach. "Don't think about it yet." "How can I not? In a few hours, I'll be standing across from my brother with a loaded weapon, and one of us—" His voice cracked. "I don't want to kill him, Eliara. Despite everything, he's still my blood." "Then don't go." "We've been through this. Refuse. Let him call you a coward. Let society think what they want." She moved closer, desperate now. "Your pride isn't worth your life, or his." Adrian's laugh was bitter. "This stopped being about pride the moment he put my marriage in writing as grounds for the challenge. If I refuse, he wins by default. The challenge stands, the marriage is questioned, and you—" He reached for her, his hand trembling as it cupped her face. "You become the prize 2 cowards fought over, and neither deserved. I'm not a prize. Back up. No. You're my wife, and I will not let him take that from us." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Even if it costs me everything." The finality in his voice terrified her. This wasn't bravado. This was a man who'd made his choice and was prepared to see it through to the bloody end. "Adrian, if something happens tomorrow," he interrupted. "If Caleb's aim is true and mine isn't, I need you to know something. Don't do this. I love you." The words were fierce, absolute. "Not because I orchestrated events to possess you. Not because you were a challenge I needed to win. I love you because you're brave and honest, and you refuse to be anything other than exactly who you are. I love you because being with you makes me want to be better than the manipulative bastard I've always been. Tears burned her eyes. You can't say these things now, not when... When else would I say them? His hand slid to her neck, his touch burning. If I die tomorrow, I die knowing I told you the truth. Finally, completely. You're not going to die. Maybe not, but if I do... He pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that tasted like goodbye and desperation and love wrapped in violence. If I do, know that you were worth every moment, every manipulation, every risk. You were worth all of it. Eliara kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. This man who'd broken her trust and was now preparing to die defending her honor whether she wanted him to or not. Come to bed, she whispered against his mouth. He pulled back, searching her eyes. Your chambers or mine? Ours. The word felt like reclaiming something she'd thought was lost. No more separate rooms, not tonight. They made love like it was the last time, like tomorrow might steal this from them forever. Adrian touched her with reverent desperation, his hands learning every inch of her skin like he was trying to memorize it. She touched him back with equal intensity, tasting salt on his skin, sweat or tears she couldn't tell. After, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled like both of them, Adrian whispered against her hair. If I survive tomorrow, I'm spending the rest of my life earning your trust back. If you survive tomorrow, she corrected. When you survive. When? But she heard the doubt underneath. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, pretending tomorrow wasn't coming. But it came anyway. Hyde Park. At dawn was gray and cold, mist rolling across the grass like something out of a nightmare. Eliara stood beside Adrian's carriage, watching the preparations with a sick feeling in her stomach. Adrian's second, Lord Pemberton, a grim-faced man who clearly thought this entire thing was madness, was checking the pistols. Across the field, Caleb stood with his own second, his posture rigid, his face unreadable in the weak light. You shouldn't be here, Adrian said for the 10th time. And yet, here I am. Eliara kept her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. Someone needs to witness this insanity. It's not too late. I can take you home. No. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. I told you, this ends today, my way. Before he could respond, Caleb started walking across the field toward them. Adrian went rigid, his hand moving instinctively toward the pistol at his side. But Caleb's hands were empty, raised in a gesture of peace that looked more like surrender. I want to talk to her, Caleb called. Alone. Absolutely not, Adrian started. Yes, Eliara said. Eliara. It's fine. She squeezed his arm once, then let go. I need to do this. She met Caleb halfway across the field, far enough from both seconds that their conversation would be private. Up close, he looked worse than Adrian, hollow-eyed, unshaven, like he'd spent the night drinking instead of sleeping. You look terrible, she said. I feel worse. His attempt at a smile fell flat. I didn't think you'd actually come. I couldn't let you kill each other without trying to stop it. There's only one way to stop it. His eyes were intense, desperate. Come with me. Right now. We'll leave London, start over somewhere Adrian can't touch us. The duel ends, the marriage ends, and you're free. I don't want to be free of Adrian. The words landed like a slap. Caleb actually flinched, his expression crumbling. After everything he did? After all the lies? After everything both of you did? Eliara's voice was hard. You think you're better than him? You manipulated me just as much. You sent that letter not to protect me, but to hurt him. You challenged him to this duel, not to defend my honor, but to destroy his. That's not true. It is. And we both know it. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. You don't love me, Caleb. You love the idea of me. You love what winning me away from Adrian would prove. But you don't actually love me. You're wrong. Am I? Tell me one thing about me that matters. One thing that isn't about how I make you feel or what I represent. Tell me something real. Caleb opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. That's what I thought. Eliara's smile was sad. Adrian knows I take my tea with too much sugar, that I read philosophy when I'm anxious, that I bite my lip when I'm trying not to cry. He learned me, Caleb. You just wanted to own me. And he doesn't? He did. But he's trying not to. That's more than you ever offered. She took a breath, steadying herself. I'm asking you, begging you, to end this. Walk away. Let Adrian and me figure out our marriage without your interference. I can't do that. Why not? Because I already loaded the pistol. His voice was hollow. Because the challenge is issued and honor demands satisfaction. Because if I walk away now, I'm not just a coward. I'm the man who lost everything to his brother and did nothing about it. So your pride is worth more than your life, than his. My pride is all I have left. Caleb's expression hardened. You chose him. Society chose him. Even our father always chose him. I'm the spare, the disappointment. The charming waste of space will never measure up to the great Duke of Arden. This isn't about Adrian. This is about you hating yourself. The accusation hung between them, raw and true. Caleb's face went white. You don't know anything about me. I know you're standing here preparing to kill your brother because you can't stand being second place one more time. Iliara's voice cracked. I know you'd rather die than admit you're not the hero of this story. And what am I? The villain? No, you're just human, flawed and hurting, and making terrible choices because you don't know how else to cope. She reached for his hand, squeezing it once. But you can make a different choice now. You can walk away. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something shift in his expression, a crack in the armor, a possibility of surrender. Then he pulled his hand free, stepping back. I can't. His voice was final. I'm sorry, Iliara, but this ends the way it has to end. He turned and walked back to his second, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the field. Iliara returned to Adrian on shaking legs, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. What did he say? Adrian asked. That he won't stop. Adrian's jaw clenched. Then neither will I. Lord Pemberton approached, the wooden case of dueling pistols open in his hands. It's time, Your Grace. The next few minutes happened in a blur of ritual and formality. The seconds loaded the pistols. 1 ball each, measured powder, everything according to the code duello that supposedly made this civilized instead of murder. The rules were explained, though everyone already knew them. 20 paces, turn, fire. First blood ends it, or death, whichever came first. Adrian took his pistol with steady hands. Across the field, Caleb did the same. They stood back to back in the center of the field. Iliara wanted to scream, wanted to run between them, force them to see reason, but she stood frozen, watching the nightmare unfold with the sick certainty that this was always how it was going to end. 20 paces, Lord Pemberton called. On my count. They began to walk. 1 step, 2, 3. Iliara's vision blurred with tears. This was insane. This was barbaric. 2 brothers destroying each other over a woman who didn't fully want either of them, and she was powerless to stop it. 10 paces. 11. 12. She saw Adrian's shoulders rise and fall with each breath, saw Caleb's hand tighten on his pistol, saw the future splitting in front of her like a river around stone, one path ending in Adrian's death, another in Caleb's, both equally devastating. 18. 19. 20. Turn! They turned. Time slowed. Iliara saw everything with crystalline clarity, the mist swirling around their boots, the weak sunlight breaking through clouds, the way both men's hands raised simultaneously, pistols leveling at each other's hearts. She saw Adrian's face, calm and resigned, like he'd already accepted whatever came next. She saw Caleb's face, twisted with anguish and determination, like he was forcing himself to do something he knew was wrong. She saw their fingers begin to squeeze the triggers. Stop! Iliara's scream ripped through the morning air, raw and desperate. She was running before she knew she'd decided to move, her feet pounding across wet grass, her robe flying behind her like wings. Both men's heads turned toward her, shock breaking through their focus. Iliara, get back! Adrian shouted. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. She ran straight into the line of fire, positioning herself directly between the 2 brothers, her arms spread wide, her body a shield between their aimed weapons. If you want to shoot each other, she said, her voice shaking but loud, you'll have to shoot through me first. The silence that followed was absolute. Iliara. Adrian's voice was strangled. Move, now. No. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. She turned to face him, and the terror in his expression made her chest ache. I'm the reason you're both standing here with loaded pistols. I'm the prize you're fighting over, so if blood needs to be spilled, it goes through me first. Christ, Iliara, move! Caleb's voice came from behind her. She turned partially, keeping both brothers in her peripheral vision. Put down the guns. We can't, Caleb started. Put them down, the words tore from her throat. Both of you, right now, or I swear to God I will stand here until one of you pulls that trigger and kills me along with your brother. You're being hysterical, Caleb tried. I'm being the only sane person in this goddamn field. She was crying now, hot tears streaming down her face. You want to know the truth? The real truth? I don't love either of you the way you think I should. Both men froze. I don't love you, Caleb, because you never gave me the chance to know the real you. Just the charming mask you wear to hide how much you hate yourself. Her voice was ragged. And I don't fully trust Adrian because he built our entire relationship on manipulation and lies. Iliara, Adrian's voice was pained. But I chose Adrian. The words were final, irrevocable. Not because he's perfect. Not because he deserves it. I chose him because when everything fell apart, he didn't run. He stayed. He fought for us even when I hated him for it. And that stubborn, possessive, controlling love is real. It's flawed and messy, and sometimes it feels like drowning, but it's real. She turned fully to Caleb now, her hands clenched at her sides. You say you love me, but you were ready to kill your own brother to prove it. That's not love. That's obsession. That's ego. That's you trying to win something you never actually wanted. Caleb's pistol wavered. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She took a step toward him, then another, until she was standing directly in front of his aimed weapon. If you really love me, if any part of what you felt was real, you'll lower that gun and walk away. You'll let me have my imperfect marriage with your imperfect brother. You'll stop trying to save me from choices I've already made. The pistol was shaking now, Caleb's entire arm trembling. His face was white, twisted with anguish and rage, and something that might have been grief. He doesn't deserve you, Caleb said, his voice breaking. Maybe not, but I deserve the chance to find out. She reached up slowly, carefully, and pushed the barrel of his pistol aside. Please, Caleb, let me go. For a long moment, nothing happened. The entire world held its breath. Then Caleb's arm dropped. The pistol fell from his fingers into the wet grass. He stood there, defeated, broken, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he whispered, for all of it. I'm so sorry. I know. Eliar's voice was gentle now. But sorry doesn't fix this. Only walking away does. Caleb looked past her to Adrian, who still held his pistol but had lowered it to his side. Something passed between the brothers. Recognition, maybe, or just exhaustion. The acknowledgement that this war had no winners, only survivors. Take care of her, Caleb said hoarsely, or You'll what? Adrian's voice was quiet but carried across the space. Challenge me again? We both know how that ends now. Caleb flinched. Then he turned and walked away, his second hurrying after him, leaving his pistol lying in the grass like a discarded toy. Iliara waited until Caleb's carriage disappeared into the morning mist before turning back to Adrian. He looked gutted. Relieved and devastated at the same time, still holding his pistol like he wasn't quite sure the danger had passed. You could have been killed, he said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Running into the line of fire like that? Christ, Iliara, what were you thinking? I was thinking I couldn't watch you die. So you decided to die instead? If that's what it took to stop this insanity, yes. She crossed to him, gently taking the pistol from his hand and passing it to Lord Pemberton, who'd been watching the entire scene with wide eyes. Someone had to be the adult. Adrian grabbed her shoulders, his grip tight enough to bruise. Don't ever do that again. Do what? Save your life? Risk yours so carelessly. His voice cracked. I can't. I couldn't survive losing you. Not like that. Not anyway. She reached up, framing his face with her hands. He was shaking, she realized. This controlled, manipulative man who orchestrated everything was falling apart in her arms. I'm here, she said softly. I'm alive. We both are. Because you're insane. But there was no heat in it, just exhausted relief. Because I love you. The words slipped out before she could stop them. 3 words she hadn't meant to say. Not yet. Not like this. But they were true. and there was no taking them back. Adrian went completely still. "What?" "I love you." She said it again, stronger this time. "I don't want to. God knows it would be easier if I didn't. But I do. I love your stubborn refusal to give up on us. I love the way you look at me like I'm the only thing that matters. I love that you're trying, actually trying, to be better than the manipulative bastard you know you are." His hand slid from her shoulders to her face, trembling as they cupped her cheeks. "Say it again." "I love you, Adrian Arden." "Again." "I love you." He kissed her like she was oxygen, and he was drowning, his mouth desperate and claiming and grateful all at once. She kissed him back with equal intensity, tasting salt and relief, and the beginning of something that might actually be real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Probably not." She smiled through her tears. "But you're stuck with me anyway. Thank God." His laugh was rough, pained. "Thank God." They stood there in the middle of Hyde Park as the sun finally broke through the clouds, holding each other like they'd just survived the end of the world. Because, in a way, they had. The scandal that followed was predictable and brutal. News of the duel and its dramatic interruption spread through London society like wildfire. The papers had a field day. "Duchess stops duel by standing in line of fire," screamed one headline. "Love triangle between Arden brothers finally resolved," declared another. The gossips were merciless. Some called Eliara brave. Others called her reckless. A few suggested the entire thing had been theater, a performance designed to solidify her position and eliminate Caleb as a rival. Eliara ignored all of it. She had more important things to focus on, like rebuilding a marriage that had nearly been destroyed before it began. Adrian kept his promises. Full transparency, no more secrets, treating her as an actual partner instead of a possession to protect. It wasn't always easy. He still had controlling tendencies, still wanted to orchestrate solutions to problems she was perfectly capable of solving herself. But when she called him on it, he listened, adjusted, tried. "I'm a work in progress," he admitted one evening, after she'd caught him trying to solve a social conflict she was handling without asking her first. "So am I," she said. "We'll figure it out together." They did. Slowly, painfully, with setbacks and arguments, and moments where old patterns resurfaced. But they kept trying, kept choosing each other, kept building something real from the wreckage of manipulation and lies. Caleb disappeared for 3 months. No one knew where he went. Some said Scotland, others France. Adrian received one letter, brief and formal, saying Caleb needed time to reassess his priorities and choices. There was no mention of Eliara, no apology, just a cold acknowledgement that he'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. "Do you miss him?" Adrian asked when the letter arrived. Eliara considered the question honestly. "I miss the possibility of what we could have been, but I don't miss him. Not really." "Good." Adrian's arm tightened around her waist. "Because I'm selfish enough to be glad he's gone." She laughed despite herself. "At least you're honest about it." "I'm trying to be honest about everything." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Even the ugly parts. Especially the ugly parts." That honesty became the foundation of everything else. They learned to fight productively, to voice resentments before they festered, to choose vulnerability over pride. It wasn't the fairy tale romance society expected. It was messier, harder, more complicated. But it was real. 6 months after the duel, Adrian called her into his study. "I have something for you," he said. Eliara raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "Probably." But he was smiling. He handed her a leather portfolio, worn and familiar. She opened it and found every piece of evidence from Caleb's letter, the correspondence, the bribed servant's testimony, the detailed timeline of Adrian's manipulation. All of it. "This is everything," she said quietly. "Everything I did wrong. Every choice I made that led us here." Adrian's voice was steady. "I want you to have it. Keep it. Burn it. Whatever you need. But I won't hide from what I did anymore." Eliara stared at the documents, this evidence of betrayal that had nearly destroyed them. She could keep it, use it as ammunition in future fights, hold it over him as a reminder of his capacity for deception. Instead, she walked to the fireplace and threw the entire portfolio into the flames. Adrian watched it burn without protest. "We're not those people anymore," she said, watching the pages curl and blacken. "I don't want to be the woman who can't trust her husband, and you don't want to be the man who can't be trusted. So we choose to be different." Just like that? Just like that. She turned to face him. "The past happened. We can't change it, but we can choose what we do with it." He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "I love you, more than I thought I was capable of loving anything." "I know." She smiled against his chest. "You tell me every day. I'll tell you every day for the rest of our lives." "Good." She pulled back to look at him. "Because I plan on holding you to that." They stood there in his study, watching their past burn to ash, and Iliara felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just acceptance that perfection was impossible and messy was enough. Then a knock at the door interrupted the moment. Lord Pemberton entered, looking grim. "Your Grace, there's been news." Adrian's arm tightened around Iliara. "What kind of news?" "About your brother. He's returned to London." Iliara felt Adrian go rigid beside her. "When?" Adrian's voice was controlled, but she heard the tension underneath. "This morning. He's taken rooms at the Claridge, and your Grace—" Pemberton hesitated. "He's requested a meeting with both of you." The piece Iliara had just found shattered like glass. "Did he say why?" she asked. "No, your Grace. Just that it was urgent and concerned all three of you." Iliara looked at Adrian, saw her own apprehension mirrored in his eyes. They'd spent 6 months rebuilding, 6 months healing, 6 months learning to trust each other. And now Caleb was back. "Do we go?" she asked quietly. Adrian's jaw clenched. "We don't have to. We can ignore him, refuse to see him, make it clear he's not welcome in our lives. Or we can face him, end this once and for all. You want to see him? I want closure, Mutt." She squeezed his hand. "Real closure, not just him disappearing and us wondering when he'll come back." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Pemberton. "Tell Caleb we'll meet him, tomorrow, 2 o'clock, at the estate." "Very good, your Grace." When Pemberton left, Iliara turned to her husband. "Are you sure about this?" "No." Adrian pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that tasted like fear and determination. "But we're doing it anyway, together." "Together," she agreed. But as she lay in bed that night, wrapped in Adrian's arms, listening to his steady breathing, Iliara couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything. Caleb was back, and men like Caleb Arden didn't request meetings unless they had something to say that couldn't be said in a letter. Something that would either finally free them all from the past, or drag them back into the war they'd barely survived the first time. Amidst. Caleb arrived exactly at 2, looking different than Iliara remembered. He'd lost weight. His face was thinner, harder, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult realizations. The charming golden boy was gone, replaced by someone who looked like he'd been through his own personal hell and barely made it out. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, his voice formal as Pemberton showed him into the drawing room where Iliara and Adrian waited. Adrian didn't stand, didn't offer his hand, just sat beside Iliara on the settee, his posture protective, his expression carved from ice. "You have 10 minutes." "I don't need 10 minutes. Caleb remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back like a soldier reporting for duty. "I came to apologize. Properly. And to say goodbye." Iliara's breath caught. "Goodbye? I'm leaving England. Permanently." Caleb's eyes met hers, and she saw pain there, but also something else. Resignation, maybe. Or peace. "I've accepted a position with the East India Company. I leave next week." "India?" Adrian's surprise broke through his control. "You hate India." "I hate who I am here more." Caleb's smile was sad. "I spent 3 months traveling, thinking, trying to figure out why I did what I did. And the answer, the real answer, is that I was jealous of you, Adrian, of everything you are and everything I'm not." "Caleb," Adrian started. "Let me finish, please." Caleb took a breath. "I've spent my entire life being the spare, the disappointment, the brother who would never measure up to the great Duke of Arden. And somewhere along the way, that resentment became who I was. Everything I did was designed to prove I was better than you, or to hurt you for being what I couldn't be. He turned to Eliara. And you were just another battlefield, another way to prove I could take something that mattered to him. I convinced myself I loved you, but really, I just loved the idea of winning. The honesty was brutal and unexpected. I hurt you, Caleb continued, his voice rough. Both of you. And I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. You deserve better than being caught in our family's dysfunction. Eliara didn't know what to say. Didn't know if there were words for this moment, the man who'd nearly destroyed her marriage standing in her drawing room, offering an apology that came 6 months too late and exactly on time. Why India? She asked finally. Because it's far enough away that I can't hurt you anymore. Can't show up drunk at parties and make things awkward. Can't send letters or make dramatic gestures. His smile was self-deprecating. And because, maybe, if I'm lucky, I'll find out who I am when I'm not trying to compete with my brother. Adrian stood slowly, and Eliara saw something shift in his expression, the ice cracking, revealing something rawer underneath. You're really leaving, Adrian said. I'm really leaving. For how long? 5 years minimum, maybe forever. Caleb's throat worked. Depends on what I find there. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Eliara never expected. He crossed the room and pulled his brother into an embrace. Caleb went rigid with shock. Then his arms came up, returning the hug, and both brothers stood there holding each other like they were trying to bridge years of resentment and pain through sheer force of will. Don't die in India, Adrian said roughly. That's an order. I'll do my best. Caleb's voice was thick. Take care of her. Every day. They broke apart, both men's eyes suspiciously bright. Caleb turned to Eliara one last time. Be happy. That's all I want now. Just be happy. You too, she said softly. He smiled, genuine and sad and free all at once. I'll try. Then he was gone, walking out of their lives as dramatically as he'd entered them, leaving nothing but the echo of footsteps and the weight of words finally said. Eliara stood and moved to Adrian, wrapping her arms around him from behind. She felt his hands cover hers, holding tight. Are you all right? She asked. I don't know. His voice was raw. He's my brother. Despite everything, he's still my brother. I know. Do you think you'll actually find what he's looking for? I hope so. She pressed a kiss to his shoulder. Everyone deserves a second chance. Adrian turned in her arms, his expression intense. Even manipulative dukes who orchestrate their wives' entire lives? Especially them, she smiled, as long as they're willing to spend the rest of their lives making up for it. The rest of my life, he agreed. And then some. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And Eliara felt the last piece of the past finally let go its grip on her heart. Caleb was gone. The war was over, and she and Adrian could finally move forward without ghosts haunting their marriage. What do we do now? She asked when they broke apart. Adrian's smile was devastating. We live, we build, we choose each other every single day. Every single day, she repeated. And for the first time since this entire mess began, Eliara believed they actually would. But fate, it seemed, had one more test in store. 3 days after Caleb's departure, Eliara woke feeling ill. She dismissed it as stress, the emotional toll of the past weeks finally catching up with her. But when the nausea continued for a week, then 2, Adrian insisted she see a physician. Dr. Morrison arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, examined her with professional efficiency, and delivered news that made the entire world tilt sideways. Congratulations, Your Grace. You're with child. Eliara stared at him, certain she'd heard wrong. I'm what? Approximately 2 months along, if my examination is correct. The doctor smiled. You should expect the babe to arrive in early spring. She was pregnant, carrying Adrian's child. The enormity of it hit her like a wave. She'd spent months fighting to rebuild her marriage, to learn to trust her husband, to forge something real from manipulation and lies. And now there would be a child. A tiny, innocent life that would bind her to Adrian forever in ways that went beyond vows and promises. Dr. Morrison left after giving her instructions about rest and nutrition, promising to return in a month to check on her progress. Eliara sat alone in her chambers, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach, trying to process this new reality. She found Adrian in his study, reviewing correspondence. He looked up when she entered, his smile immediate and warm. "Feeling better? Morrison said he'd seen you. I'm pregnant." The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. Adrian froze, the paper in his hand forgotten. "What?" "Pregnant. 2 months. The baby will come in spring." She watched emotions flicker across his face too fast to catalog. "Say something." He set down the paper with careful precision, his hands shaking. Then he crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "We're having a baby." Is this?" She couldn't finish the question. "Am I happy?" He pulled back, framing her face with his hands. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Eliara, I'm terrified and overwhelmed and so goddamn happy I can barely stand it." Relief flooded through her. "I was worried you'd think it was too soon, that we haven't had enough time to—" "It's perfect timing." He kissed her, gentle and reverent. "We'll figure it out, just like we figured out everything else." "Together," she said, "together." He sank to his knees in front of her, pressing his forehead against her stomach in a gesture so tender it made her throat tight. "I promise you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise both of you. I'll be better. I'll earn this. I'll spend every day making sure you know how loved you are." Eliara ran her fingers through his hair, feeling tears slide down her own cheeks. "You already do." They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in the quiet miracle of new life and second chances. Then Adrian looked up at her, his expression shifting into something more serious. "There's something I need to ask you." "What?" "Marry me." She blinked. "Adrian, we're already married." "I know, but I want to do it again, properly this time. No manipulation, no orchestration, just you and me, choosing each other freely, with our family as witness." His hands tightened on her hips. "Will you marry me, Eliara? Again? For real this time?" The question was absurd and perfect, and exactly what they needed. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you again, as many times as you want." He stood, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like joy and promise, and the beginning of something that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with the future they were building together. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his hand over hers on her stomach. "Boy or girl?" he asked. "Does it matter?" "Not even a little bit." His smile was devastating. "As long as they have your strength and your heart, and your stubbornness and your intensity," she added. "God help us both." They laughed, and it felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. The wallflower had become a duchess. The manipulative duke had become a husband trying desperately to deserve his wife. And now they were becoming parents. It wasn't the story either of them had planned, but it was theirs. Messy and complicated and absolutely perfectly real. And as Adrian pulled her close, whispering promises to both her and the life growing inside her, Eliara finally understood what it meant to be chosen. Not as a prize, not as a possession, but as a partner, an equal, a person worth fighting for. And that. Spring came to London with rain and new beginnings. Eliara stood at the window of the nursery, one hand resting on her swollen belly, watching water stream down the glass. 7 months pregnant now, heavy with child and anticipation, counting the days until the baby arrived in this strange, painful, beautiful chapter of her life, finally transformed into something she could hold. Behind her, Adrian was assembling a cradle with the kind of intense focus he usually reserved for political strategy. He'd insisted on doing it himself, despite having servants who could manage it in half the time. "You're going to hurt yourself," she said without turning around. "I'm not going to hurt myself. I'm a grown man perfectly capable of following instructions." A crash. A muttered curse. Eliara smiled. "How's that working out for you? The instructions are clearly wrong." But she heard the smile in his voice. Or possibly in German, I can't tell. She turned to find him sitting on the floor, surrounded by wooden pieces and metal hardware, looking simultaneously frustrated and adorable. 7 months of marriage, real marriage, built on honesty instead of manipulation. and he could still surprise her with moments like this. "Want help?" she offered. "I want to prove I can do this one thing without orchestrating a solution or bribing someone to do it for me." He picked up two pieces, trying to fit them together. "It's important." "Why?" "Because I'm going to be a father, and fathers should be able to build their children's furniture without having an existential crisis about it." Eliara lowered herself carefully into the rocking chair they'd placed by the window, her body ungainly with the weight of pregnancy. "You're going to be a wonderful father." "You don't know that." "I do. Because you're trying. Because you care enough to sit on that floor cursing at Swedish furniture instructions instead of delegating it to someone else." She smiled. "That's what makes good fathers. Not perfection. Just showing up." Adrian set down the pieces and crossed to her, kneeling beside the chair. His hand found her belly, spreading across the swell where their child grew. The baby kicked, a strong flutter against his palm, and his expression softened into something that still made her breath catch. "I'm terrified," he admitted quietly. "Of what?" "That I'll fail them the way I failed you in the beginning. That I'll try to control everything and end up pushing them away. That I'll be my father, cold and distant and more concerned with legacy than love." "You won't be." Eliara covered his hand with hers. "You know what you did wrong. You're actively working to be better. That's more than most men manage." "It doesn't feel like enough." "It's always enough to try." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. "Besides, you have me, and I will absolutely call you out if you start trying to orchestrate our child's life." His laugh was soft, relieved. "I'm counting on it." They sat like that for a long moment, connected by touch and promise, and the life growing between them. Outside, the rain continued its steady rhythm, washing away winter and making space for something new. Then the doorbell rang, shattering the peace. Adrian frowned. "We're not expecting anyone." Footsteps in the hallway. Lord Pemberton's voice, carefully neutral. "Your Grace, there's a visitor. He says it's urgent." Iliara's stomach dropped. "Caleb? He's supposed to be in India." But Adrian was already standing, his expression shifting into something harder, more guarded. They found Caleb in the drawing room, looking even worse than when he'd left. His clothes were travel-stained, his face gaunt, dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard journeys. "You're back early," Adrian said, his voice carefully neutral. "India didn't work out?" "India was fine." Caleb's voice was rough. "I came back because—" He stopped, his eyes landing on Eliara's pregnant belly. The color drained from his face. "Christ, you're—" "7 months," she said quietly. Caleb sat down heavily, like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "A baby. You're having a baby. Why are you here, Caleb?" Adrian's voice was hard. "You said goodbye. You left. What changed?" "Father died." The words landed like stones. Adrian went very still. "When?" 2 weeks ago. Heart failure. It was quick." Caleb's hands clenched on his knees. "His solicitor sent word to India. I came back as soon as I could." Eliara watched her husband's face, saw the emotions flicker across it too fast to catalog. Grief, relief, anger. Something that might have been regret for a relationship that had never been what either of them needed. "I'm sorry," she said, because someone needed to say it. "Don't be. He was a bastard when he was alive. Death doesn't change that." But Caleb's voice cracked on the words. "There's a will. Readings tomorrow. I wanted to warn you before—" He stopped. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" Adrian asked. "Just come tomorrow, both of you. You'll see." Caleb stood, clearly preparing to leave. "Congratulations, by the way. On the baby. I'm sure you'll—" He couldn't finish. He left before either of them could respond, disappearing as abruptly as he'd arrived. Eliara turned to Adrian, saw the tension in his shoulders, the tight set of his jaw. "Are you all right?" "I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair. "I hated him. My father. Hated what he did to our family, the way he pitted Caleb and me against each other, the cold distance he maintained even when we were children desperate for his approval. It's okay to grieve anyway." "Is it? Can you grieve someone who never loved you the way they should have?" "You're not grieving him." Eliara moved to her husband, taking his hands. "You're grieving the father you wish you'd had, the one who would have been proud of you, the one who would have taught you love instead of control." Adrian's expression crumbled. He pulled her against him, carefully, mindful of her belly, and she felt his shoulders shake with silent sobs. "I don't want to be him," he whispered against her hair. "I don't want our child to stand at my funeral someday feeling nothing but relief." "You won't be? You already aren't." She held him tighter. "You're choosing differently. That's what breaks the cycle." They stood there in the drawing room as afternoon faded into evening, holding each other against grief and fear and the weight of inheritance. The will reading the next day was a circus. The late Duke's solicitor presided over a room full of distant relatives, minor nobility, and various hangers-on hoping for some small bequest. Eliara sat beside Adrian, her hand in his, while Caleb sat across from them, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The first part was standard: minor bequests to servants, charitable donations, property distributions. Then the solicitor reached the major provisions, and the entire room went silent. "To my eldest son, Adrian, I leave the title of Duke, the entailed estates, and the political connections befitting his station. I trust he will manage them with the cold efficiency he has always exhibited." Adrian's hand tightened on Eliara's, but his face remained impassive. "To my youngest son, Caleb, I leave the sum of £50,000 and the country estate in Yorkshire, with the hope that he will finally find purpose beyond disappointing me." Caleb flinched like he'd been struck. The solicitor cleared his throat. "There is also a letter, to be read aloud to both sons, the late Duke's explicit instructions." He unfolded a piece of paper and began to read in a voice that somehow made the dead man present in the room again. "Adrian and Caleb, if you're hearing this, I'm dead, and you're probably relieved. I don't blame you. I was not a good father. I was cold where I should have been warm, demanding where I should have been understanding, controlling where I should have been supportive." The words hung in the air, shocking in their honesty. "I made you compete for my approval, thinking it would make you strong. Instead, I made you hate each other. I made Adrian think love was manipulation and control. I made Caleb think he would never be good enough. These were failures I knew I was committing and committed anyway because I didn't know how to be different." Eliara felt tears sting her eyes. Beside her, Adrian sat frozen, his face pale. "Adrian, you are everything I wanted you to be. Powerful, intelligent, capable of running an empire. But you're also what I feared I made you, someone who controls because he's terrified of losing. Learn to let go, learn to trust, learn that love doesn't require orchestration. Your wife already knows this. Listen to her." The solicitor paused, then continued. "Caleb, you are everything I couldn't understand. Warm, charming, desperate to be loved instead of feared. I punished you for it, called it weakness, tried to harden you into something you weren't. I was wrong. Your capacity for feeling is a strength, not a weakness. Stop running from it. Stop trying to prove you're someone else. Be exactly who you are, and the right people will love you for it." Caleb was crying openly now, tears streaming down his face. "You're brothers. You share blood and history and a childhood that damaged you both in different ways. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for making you weapons against each other instead of allies. I hope—" The solicitor's voice wavered slightly. "I hope you can forgive each other and build something better than what I gave you. You both deserve that. Signed, a father who failed you." The silence that followed was absolute. Eliara looked across the room at Caleb, saw him staring at Adrian with an expression that held years of pain and longing and desperate hope for reconciliation. She looked at her husband, saw the same emotions reflected there, buried under layers of control and pride. "Talk to him," she whispered. Adrian's jaw clenched. "Not here." "Then somewhere, but talk to him." She squeezed his hand. "Life's too short for this. You both deserve better." The reading concluded. People dispersed. Caleb left quickly, clearly overwhelmed. Adrian sat motionless, still holding Eliar's hand like it was the only thing anchoring him to earth. "He knew," Adrian said finally. "Our father knew what he was doing to us, and he did it anyway. Some people can see their own damage, but don't know how to stop inflicting it." Eliara's voice was gentle. "It doesn't excuse it, but maybe it explains it. I spent my entire life trying to earn his approval, and all along he knew he was destroying me. Not destroying, damaging. There's a difference." She shifted to face him fully. "You were damaged, Adrian, but you're not broken. You chose to be different. You chose to change. That's everything." He turned to her, and the vulnerability in his expression nearly broke her heart. "What if I can't? What if I'm too much like him and I hurt our child the way he hurt me? You won't. You don't know that. I do. She placed his hand on her belly again, where their baby moved beneath his palm. Because you're already terrified of it. And people who care about the damage they might cause are the ones least likely to cause it. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers, his breath shaky. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. You don't get to decide what I deserve. I do, and I choose you. She kissed him softly. Every day. Even on the hard ones. Especially on the hard ones. They sat together in the empty room, mourning a man neither had loved but both had needed, grieving childhoods that couldn't be fixed and accepting the scars that remained. Later that evening, Adrian went to find Caleb. He was at their father's London townhouse, sorting through papers with the mechanical efficiency of someone who needed something to do with his hands. We need to talk, Adrian said from the doorway. Caleb looked up, surprise flickering across his face. About what? Everything. Nothing. I don't know. Adrian moved into the room, suddenly uncertain. He was right, Father. We've spent our entire lives fighting each other instead of the real enemy. Which was? Him. His expectations. His manipulation. Adrian sat down across from his brother. I'm tired of it, Caleb. I'm tired of this war. You're about to be an uncle. I'm about to be a father. Can we stop? Caleb's expression twisted with something that might have been hope or fear. I don't know how. Neither do I. But we can try. Adrian's voice was rough. I'm sorry for all of it. For using you to get to Eliara. For making you feel like you were never good enough. For choosing pride over family. I'm sorry too. Caleb's voice cracked. For nearly destroying your marriage. For challenging you to that insane duel. For being so desperate to win that I forgot to care who I hurt. They sat in silence for a long moment, years of resentment and pain hanging between them like fog. Then Adrian stood and offered his hand. Caleb stared at it, shocked. Then he took it, and Adrian pulled him into an embrace that was awkward and fierce and long overdue. Brothers, Adrian said quietly. Brothers, Caleb agreed. When they broke apart, both men's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Are you really going back to India? Adrian asked. I think I need to. Not to run away this time, just to figure out who I am when I'm not competing with you. Caleb smiled sadly. But I'll come back. For the baby's christening, for holidays, for awkward family dinners where we both pretend to know how to be normal. I'd like that. Adrian's voice was sincere. You're my brother. I want you in my life, in our lives. Even after everything? Especially after everything. Adrian squeezed Caleb's shoulder. We're all we've got left of our family. Broken and damaged and trying to be better. That's worth something. Yeah. Caleb's smile was genuine this time. It really is. And shit. 3 weeks later, Eliara went into labor. It was the middle of the night, rain pouring down outside. The kind of storm that felt apocalyptic and cleansing at the same time. Adrian woke to find her doubled over beside the bed, her face pale with pain. It's time, she managed between contractions. What followed was hours of controlled chaos. The midwife arrived. The physician came as backup. Adrian refused to leave, holding Eliara's hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place. I hate you, she gasped during a particularly brutal contraction. I know, Adrian said calmly, wiping sweat from her forehead. You can hate me all you want. Just keep breathing. Easy for you to say. You're not... She bit off the words as another wave of pain hit. It went on for hours. Dawn broke, pale and gray, and still the baby hadn't come. Eliara was exhausted, Adrian was terrified, and the midwife was starting to look worried. Something's wrong, the physician said quietly. The baby's positioned poorly. We may need to put... No. Eliara's voice was fierce despite her exhaustion. No surgery. I can do this. Your Grace? She said no. Adrian's voice was steel. We trust her. What do we need to do? The physician explained positioning changes, different techniques to encourage the baby to shift. They tried everything, and finally, something worked. I can see the head, the midwife announced. One more push, Your Grace, just one more. Eliara screamed, a primal sound of effort and pain and determination, and the baby slid into the world with a wet rush and an immediate, furious wail. "A girl," the midwife said, her voice thick with emotion. "A healthy baby girl." Adrian was crying, Eliara was crying, the baby was crying, and somehow, through the chaos and pain and overwhelming emotion, the midwife cleaned and wrapped the tiny, perfect creature and placed her in Eliara's arms. She was beautiful, red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that punched at the air like she was already fighting the world. "Hello," Eliara whispered, her voice breaking. "Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you." The baby's cries quieted, her unfocused eyes seeming to search for her mother's face. And Eliara felt something inside her chest crack wide open, making room for a love so fierce and overwhelming it felt like drowning and flying at the same time. "She's perfect," Adrian breathed, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "She's absolutely perfect." "What should we name her?" Eliara asked. They discussed names for months, never settling on anything, but now, looking at their daughter's face, Adrian smiled. "Hope," he said, "because that's what she is, what we are. Hope that we can be better than what we came from." "Hope Arden," Eliara tested the name. "I love it." The physician and midwife finished their work and left them alone, a new family in the gray morning light. Adrian climbed carefully onto the bed beside Eliara, and they sat together, their daughter cradled between them, watching her tiny face shift through expressions they'd spend the next years learning to interpret. "I'm terrified," Adrian admitted quietly. "Me too. What if I mess this up? What if I—" "You won't." Eliara leaned her head against his shoulder. "We won't, because we're doing it together, and because we know what we don't want to be." Hope yawned, a tiny sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. Her hand found Adrian's finger, wrapping around it with surprising strength. "She's got my stubbornness already," Adrian said, wonder in his voice. "God help us all," Eliara murmured. They laughed, quiet and exhausted and ridiculously happy. Outside, the rain had stopped. Pale sunlight broke through clouds, streaming through the window and turning everything gold. A new day, a new beginning, a chance to build something better than what either of them had known. "I love you," Adrian said, pressing a kiss to Eliara's temple. "Both of you. More than I knew I could love anything." "We love you too." Eliara looked up at him, this man who'd orchestrated her life and then spent months learning to let her choose her own path. "Even when you're impossible. Especially when I'm impossible," he corrected with a smile. Hope made a small sound, half protest, half contentment. And Eliara knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many, they'd face them together. Not as Duke and Duchess, not as manipulator and victim, not even as husband and wife, though they were that too, but as partners, equals. Two damaged people who'd found each other in the wreckage and chosen to build something real. That was enough. That was everything. 2 years later, on a warm summer afternoon, the Arden estate gardens were filled with people. Caleb had returned from India for good, tanned and laughing, with stories of his travels and a newfound peace that showed in every gesture. He'd brought a woman with him, intelligent, sharp-tongued, completely unimpressed by his charm, and Adrian had quietly told Eliara he approved. "She keeps him honest," Adrian had said, watching Caleb try and fail to charm his way out of an argument. That's all he ever needed. Someone who sees through him and loves him anyway. Hope was running through the gardens now, her dark curls bouncing, her laughter bright as bells. She was fearless in the way only toddlers could be, convinced the world existed solely for her exploration. "Careful," Eliara called, but Adrian caught their daughter mid-stride, swinging her up into his arms. "Got you, little monster," he said, and Hope shrieked with delight. Eliara watched them together, her heart so full it ached. Adrian was everything she'd hoped he'd be as a father, present, patient, firm when necessary, but never cold. He played with Hope for hours, read to her every night, taught her that love didn't require manipulation or control. Just showing up, just being there. "You're staring," a voice said beside her. She turned to find Caleb, his companion having wandered off to examine the roses. "Am I?" At Adrian like he hung the moon. Caleb's smile was genuine, without the edge of bitterness that used to live there. "It's good to see." You're good together. We are. Eliara studied him. You look happy. I'm getting there. He watched Adrian chase Hope around a tree, both of them laughing. I'm glad he found you. Glad you found each other. Even if the path there was insane? I was going to say complicated, but insane works too. Caleb's expression sobered. I'm sorry, by the way. I've said it before, but I need to say it again, for all of it, for nearly destroying what you two have. We're past that now, Eliara said gently. All of us. We're building something new. A family that actually works. Caleb's smile was wistful. Novel concept. Hope ran over, demanding her uncle's attention with the imperious command only a 2-year-old could muster. Caleb scooped her up, making exaggerated faces that sent her into peals of laughter. Adrian came to stand beside Eliara, his arms sliding around her waist in a gesture so natural she barely noticed it anymore. Happy? He asked quietly. She leaned into him, watching their daughter charm her uncle, watching the family they'd built from ashes and manipulation and desperate choices. Impossibly. Good. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Because I plan on keeping you this happy for the next 50 years. Only 50? Fine. Forever. Happy now? Getting there. She turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him properly. Ask me again in another lifetime. He smiled against her mouth. I will. Every day. Until you're sick of hearing it. I'll never be sick of hearing it. They kissed again, soft and sweet and full of promise, while around them their family laughed and lived and proved that broken things could be mended if you were willing to do the work. Later, after the guest had left and Hope was asleep in her nursery, Eliara stood in the library where this had all begun. She found the book she'd been reading that day at the garden party, the one she'd tried to hide when Adrian first saw her. She opened it to a random page, but the words didn't matter. What mattered was the memory of being invisible, of aching to be seen, of standing in corners waiting for life to notice her. What are you thinking about? Adrian asked from the doorway. How far we've come. She set down the book. That girl at the garden party, she never could have imagined this. Which part? The Duke, the scandal, or the happy ending? All of it. None of it. She moved to him, sliding her arms around his neck. I was so desperate to be chosen, to matter to someone. And now? Now I know I always mattered. I just needed to choose myself first. She smiled. Everything else followed from that. Adrian pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I love you. For choosing yourself. For choosing us. For being brave enough to demand better than what I first offered. I love you for learning to give it. They stood there in the quiet library, two people who'd found each other through manipulation and stayed through choice, wrapped in the peace that came from hard-won understanding. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked. The way we started? Eliara considered the question honestly. Did she regret the lies, the manipulation, the pain, the betrayal that had nearly destroyed them before they'd truly begun? No, she said finally, because it made us fight for this, made us value it. Easy love might not have survived what we've been through, but love built on honesty after lies, trust after betrayal, that's unbreakable. You're certain? I'm certain. She kissed him, slow and deep. We're unbreakable, Adrian Arden. You, me, Hope, whatever comes next. We're forever. Forever, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. I'll hold you to that. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. They made love that night with the tenderness that came from years of learning each other, knowing what wounds still ached and what touches still healed. After, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled like both of them, Adrian traced patterns on her bare shoulder. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For standing in that field between me and Caleb, for demanding I be better, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it. His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing, for choosing me. Again and again, every day. Eliara squeezed his hand. Thank you for proving I made the right choice. Every day for the rest of my life, he promised. That's my vow. Not the one I made in the cathedral surrounded by people who didn't matter. This one, here, now, just us. Every day, she echoed, for the rest of our lives. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two broken people who'd been brave enough to heal together instead of apart. And in the nursery down the hall, Hope slept peacefully, dreaming toddler dreams, innocent of the war that had been waged over her mother, the manipulation that had brought her parents together, the painful journey that had forged them into the people they needed to be. She would grow up knowing love without conditions, safety without control. Parents who chose each other daily and taught her that real love was built on honesty, trust, and the courage to be vulnerable. She would never stand in corners wondering if anyone saw her, because she'd been born to a mother who'd learned visibility was claimed, not given, and a father who'd learned that love was freedom, not possession. And that legacy of hard-won wisdom and transformed pain was worth every moment of the chaos that had come before. 5 years after that, Adrian received a letter. It came on an ordinary Tuesday, mixed in with business correspondence and social invitations. But the handwriting made him pause. His father's solicitor. Inside was a single piece of paper and a smaller sealed envelope. This was found among the late Duke's effects during final estate settlement. He left instructions it should be delivered to you 7 years after his death, should you still be married to the same woman. Those conditions have been met. Adrian stared at the sealed envelope, his father's handwriting across the front. To my son, if he learned to love. He found Eliara in the garden, supervising Hope's tea party with her dolls. Their daughter was 7 now, all fierce intelligence and wild imagination, already showing signs of her mother's strength and her father's stubborn determination. "Something's come," he said, showing her the envelope. They opened it together, sitting on a bench while Hope played nearby. The letter was short. "Adrian, if you're reading this, you've been married 7 years. The solicitor tells me this is the average point when manipulated marriages collapse or transform into something real. If you're still together, you chose the latter. I'm proud of you for that, though I have no right to be. You did what I never could. You learned from your mistakes instead of repeating them. You chose love over control. You became better than me. That's all any father should want for his son, even a father too broken to say it while alive. Love her well. Raise your children better than I raised you. Break the cycle. I couldn't break. You're stronger than I ever was. Don't waste it." Adrian's hands shook as he finished reading. "He knew," Eliara said softly. "Even then, he knew we'd make it. Or he hoped." Adrian folded the letter carefully. Maybe hope was all he had left at the end. Is it enough? To hope for better even when you can't be better yourself? Adrian thought about that, about his father's cold distance and manipulative control, about the damage that had been passed down through generations, about the choice to break cycles instead of perpetuating them. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think it is. Because hope kept me trying when everything told me to give up. Hope made me believe I could be different, could be better." He looked at Eliara, at the life they'd built, at their daughter playing in the gardens they'd filled with laughter instead of cold silence. "Hope saved me." "Hope saved us both," Eliara corrected. She gestured to their daughter, in more ways than one. They sat together on the bench, watching their child play, holding a dead man's final blessing like the precious thing it was. Adrian had spent his entire life seeking his father's approval, and now, years after death, he finally had it. Not for being perfect, not for being controlled or controlling, but for learning to love, for being brave enough to change, for choosing family over legacy. That was enough, more than enough. "I love you," he told Eliara, the words as easy now as breathing. "I love you too," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Every day, still, always." Hope ran over, her hair wild with play, her face flushed with joy. "Papa, Mama, come play with me." They went, leaving the letter on the bench, leaving the past where it belonged, because the future was calling in the voice of their daughter, and the present was filled with the kind of love that couldn't be orchestrated or manipulated or controlled, just chosen, every single day. That was the real happy ending, not the absence of struggle, not the erasure of pain, not the pretense that manipulation and betrayal hadn't happened, but the choice to build something real from the wreckage, to love fiercely despite flaws, to trust again after betrayal, to show up every day and choose each other, even when, especially when, it was hard. The wallflower, who'd spent 3 seasons invisible, had become a duchess, a mother, a woman who knew her own worth and demanded the world recognize it. The manipulative duke, who'd orchestrated love because he didn't know how to ask for it, had become a husband, a father, a man who'd learned that real love was given freely or not at all. And the golden boy who'd run from everything real had become a man who'd finally stopped running, found his own peace, and learned that being second wasn't failure, it was just being human. They'd all survived the war between the Arden brothers. They'd all chosen to build something better. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. The sun set over the gardens of the Arden estate, turning everything gold. Inside, a family laughed together over dinner, told stories about their day, made plans for tomorrow. A family built on honesty after lies, trust after betrayal, love after manipulation. A family that had learned the hardest lesson of all, that the best things in life can't be orchestrated or controlled, only chosen and cherished and fought for every single day. And they were worth fighting for every single day, forever.